The story begins in the year 2035. Advancements in technology led to the creation of the world of Connect. It was as realistic as the real world, with perfectly natural AI NPCs, fancy swordsmanship, and magic that players could only experience in-game. All of these elements attracted over 100 million people to the world of Connect. Later, a large group of people lay dead in front of the gate, and a man screamed in pain as daggers struck him in the body. Then, the man fell to the ground, lifeless, in front of other onlookers who were observing Doeon, with the in-game name Crash. The men called Doeon a bastard, and one of them urged the others to charge at him since he was alone. The man also shouted that Doeon was the enemy of the Empire, and the men charged at him together to attack. However, Doeon calmly looked at them, and the system displayed his rank as 13th and his class as psychokinetic. One of the men aimed an arrow at him while shouting for him to die, but he simply raised his 2 fingers and deflected the arrow, decapitating the man. The leader ordered his knights to fire their arrows, which they did, and the arrows flew toward Doeon. He raised his hand to stop the arrows from getting closer to him, leaving the knights astonished that the arrows had stopped. Then, he hurled the arrows back at the knights, prompting the leader to order his knights to dodge, but unfortunately for the others, they were hit before they could evade. Doeon rolled the dagger in his hand and gripped it tightly. He swiftly attacked the leader with it, causing the leader's neck to bleed. Then, he approached the remaining knights, who cursed him for his psychokinetic abilities and asked about his overpowered skill. However, one of the knights was horrified when he saw something above them, noticing the weapons suspended in the air. Doeon aimed the weapons at them, making the knight curse, knowing what would happen next. Then, he lowered his hand, releasing the weapons, which flew directly at the knights. Afterward, he walked away, leaving bloody footprints, and entered the castle, leaving a trail of dead knights outside. He easily dispatched the guards inside the castle, and as he looked around, he wondered what it was. Then, he heard someone coughing beside him, and the Pope revealed that it was the end. Doeon simply stared at the Pope's pendant, realizing it was what he had been searching for. The Pope told him that God had foretold the coming of saviors to that world. Doeon raised his hand to grasp the Pope's necklace, but the Pope tightly held his hand, asking him why there were only fighters there, why he had brought chaos to the world, why he had burned the cities, killed the innocents, and enslaved the people there. Doeon just grabbed the Pope's necklace, calling the Pope an old man and telling him not to blame him but to blame the guild that had colluded with the Empire. Then, he heard footsteps outside, causing him to curse as he realized that the guild's latecomers had arrived. He ascended the stairs, with the Pope warning him not to forget that everything would unfold as God had intended, and all of them would pay for what they had done. He faced the huge box with a hole in the center and slowly placed the pendant in the hole. A magical light appeared, and when the box accepted the pendant, it revealed an underground passage. He walked down, recalling the information from the intel, but his thoughts were interrupted when he saw a book and other objects floating in the purple light. He thought these must be the very first mythical items in Connect. He knew that 5 years ago, major guilds had colluded with the Empire and destroyed the world. Everything he had done for the last 6 months had been for this, and an NPC lamenting was nothing. He understood that the major guilds now controlled Connect, and he was the only solo player left in the top 100. He placed the items inside his inventory, thinking he should take them before the others arrived, as the guilds would be very upset if they found out he had obtained them first. Then he decided to leave but noticed something on the table and wondered if it was a game cartridge. He picked it up, wondering why it was there. Suddenly, a strong pressure emanated from the game cartridge, causing him to bend his knee slightly in pain and panic. He wondered if it was a connection error and what it meant. Then, he logged out immediately. He woke up in his room and sat up abruptly when he saw a stab wound near his chest, while someone told him to stop moving. He cursed in his mind, realizing that things were going too well for him. The man, along with other suited men, asked him why he was moving so much and told him to die peacefully. This made him think that they had gone too far in the real world, and he called them pieces of trash. One of the men in the group informed their president that they had captured Doeon and asked if he wanted them to bring him alive. When their president replied, the man said they understood. Another man asked what their president had said, and the man replied that they should kill Doeon because their president only wanted Doeon's head. Then the men grabbed him, telling him that he should have played at his level and asked if he thought he had something going for him just because he was good at a game and if nothing scared him after he gained some fame. He begged them not to kill him, but one of the men covered his face and raised a sharp blade to kill him. Then, the man stabbed him repeatedly, making him think that those men were crazed for killing people over a game, and he wondered if he was going to die like this. Suddenly, someone continuously called him sir in a panic, urging him to wake up. He panikedly sat up immediately in surprise. He looked at his hand in confusion and glanced around, wondering what had just happened, as he recalled dying after being stabbed. Suddenly, he heard someone in pain beside him, and the maid asked him if he was okay while addressing him as Raoul. He wondered who Raul was but was more surprised to see a level status above the maid named Anna at level 3. Anna asked him if she should call a doctor because he had broken into a cold sweat. He was confused about what was happening and felt like he was witnessing something he shouldn't have been able to. Then, the system popped up a notification indicating that the soul had settled in, activating Connect's closed beta system, and he could now use the user interface. The current number of users was 1. He asked in panic if they were kidding him and realized that it meant he was inside the world of Connect. He walked onto his room balcony and realized that he could feel the wind and everything around him, which was very different from when he was linked with Crash. He knew that synchronization, the level of connection they had with Connect, determined their strength in the game. Normal players had around 30% synchronization, but he had close to 90%. He had managed to maintain his rank 1 position for 10 years until the major guilds appeared, but he understood that he no longer possessed that body. He felt unlucky because he had spent so much time leveling up that body. However, he remembered that it was a closed beta, and currently, there was only one user, making him wonder if he was the only one using that system in that world at the moment. He raised his hand and realized that he could still access his inventory even in the closed beta. He used his scan user's information, and the system showed that it detected locked user information and updated his data. The system rushed to provide him with the information, and he planned to use his knowledge and powers from his past life to climb to the top again. He endured the pain and saw that his current name was Raul Ashton. He was the youngest son of the Ashtons, the 5th count of the Reuben Kingdom. Ashton County was the first to fall in Connect. He recalled that Ashton County was one of Reuben Kingdom's Orthodox families. The count and his eldest son had suddenly died, and the second son had gone missing. A coup had occurred after the youngest son inherited the county. During those disasters, the Forbidden Area's barrier had broken, leading to a failed attempt to stop the monster invasion. Now, he realized that he was the youngest son of that family, Raul Ashton. He looked ahead and knew that the beautiful city he was seeing would be ruined in the next 3 years. He entered his room, thinking that he couldn't let it happen because he no longer had Bidoyan or Crash's life, meaning it was his last chance. He clenched his fist, knowing that he had suffered when he lived as Bidoyan. If he missed the chance to live there again, it would be too sad. He looked at the sword on the table, understanding that there was only one way to prevent the fall. He had to get stronger. He knew that a month later, Ashton Count's traditional coming-of-age ceremony would begin, and if he made it to the semi-finals, he could enter the Kingdom Academy to become stronger and protect his life. However, he suddenly collapsed on the floor, wondering why he felt so tired after just a few swings. Then, he saw that he was only at level 5, realizing that he was 2 levels behind the maid, and he knew he had to start training immediately for the upcoming tournament. A month later, the day of the tournament arrived, and he was amazed to see that many people were participating. He looked around, knowing that he had to fight against them. Then he remembered his coach telling him that it had only been 10 minutes, but he was exhausted. He thought it was due to the pain he had endured during the past month to get past the qualifiers. He glanced at the system, remembering that the last time he checked, he was at level 13, and he knew that his stamina was ready. He also had a plan for the matches, so he was confident that he would make it to the semi-finals. Suddenly, he felt an attack from behind, so he quickly avoided it, causing the attack to hit the ground instead. He was surprised to see a fist behind him, and the man apologized, saying his hand had slipped. The man called him a precious noble and asked if he was there for the tournament. He remembered that the man's name was Dion, and those men behind him were his cousins. Dion told him that he thought he would be crying in his room, but Raul remained silent. Raul realized that Dion was his cousin and that Dion had bullied him during swordsmanship training in the past. The instructor and the count had allowed it because of the family motto that trained like it was real, treating everyone as equals on the training ground, and holding no one responsible for injuries during training. This meant that Dion was just a scoundrel who bullied anyone weaker than him. Dion told him that he should withdraw while he still could and warned that it wouldn't be just one bone broken this time. He'd break every single one in Raul's body. Dion teasingly instructed his cousins to let Raul pass, predicting that Raul would cry again. Then Dion walked away laughing, leaving Raul with a determination to crush him in the finals. Later, in Ashton's castle, the butler reported to the man that he was holding the report for the tournament that day. The man ordered the butler to hand it over to him and asked if there was anyone useful. The butler was about to reply when the man was surprised by the list and asked the butler where Raul was. The butler replied that Raul had gone back to his room after finishing his meal, thinking that Raul had used up all his strength during the qualifiers. Count Melvin Ashton, Raul's father, told the butler that he could leave. When Melvin saw the butler come out, he laughed loudly and proudly, saying that Raul was his son because Raul had truly made it and reached the group stage. Melvin had never forced Raul to learn how to wield a sword because Raul was weaker than his brothers. However, Raul had started training a month before the tournament. At first, Raul would fall down after just 10 minutes, but he never gave up. Melvin knew that Raoul had been bullied during training due to his weak body, but he also realized that if he helped Raoul, he would be shamed for being unable to do anything without his help. So, he had waited until Raoul stood up for himself, but Raoul's progress had exceeded his expectations. He decided that after the finals were over, he should go see Raoul. The day of the finals arrived, and the audience urged them to make it fun and stop dragging it out, encouraging them to end the match. The man cursed while wondering why the weakling in front of him wasn't falling, observing Raoul, who was panting from exhaustion. The man attacked him continuously, but he managed to block each of the attacks. He did his best to avoid getting hit by the man's strikes, and the man grew increasingly frustrated that none of his attacks connected. In a fit of anger, the man launched a powerful attack, shouting at him to go down. He quickly slid backward to create some distance between them, leaving the onlookers and the audience horrified. Someone from the audience shouted that Raoul had endured the man's attacks multiple times and asked how much more he could take. Another voice chimed in, noting that Raoul had held out for quite a while, and someone encouraged Raoul, saying he had their support, which only angered the man further. The man swung his sword furiously at Raoul, calling him a rat and tell him that he can't ran away forever, but he parried the man's attack. The man swung back his sword, but Raoul parried it again while the man asks him if he's not ashamed as a member of a count's family. Raoul blocks the man's strikes with his own sword while teasingly remarking that he couldn't hear the man very well. He blocked another one of the man's attacks and then slid backward, creating distance between them. With his sword aimed at the man, Raoul prepared for the next move. One of the spectators addressed the man as Edmund, urging him to finish Raoul because the match had gone on long enough, and he had wagered his salary on Edmund. Edmund became more serious and declared that he was done playing around. He unleashed his power, forming a mana sword, and warned Raoul that he was going to end it. The audience gasped in shock at the sight of the mana sword and warned Raoul that he had to dodge it, as getting hit would mean certain defeat. Edmund swung his water-powered skill toward Raoul, instructing him to die, but to his surprise, Raoul remained standing. Edmund wondered why Raoul isn't dodging the attack. Then, Edmund attacked Raoul, creating a loud explosion erupted in the center of the arena, leaving the audience stunned. As the smoke slowly dissipated, the referee stood in the center, stopping them. The referee announced to everyone that the match was over and Raoul was the winner. Half of the audience cheered for Raoul, while the other half couldn't believe that he had won. Edmund tossed his sword aside and walked toward Raoul, expressing disbelief and questioning how Raoul could be the winner. Edmund was about to explain that if the match hadn't been stopped, he would have won, but the referee interrupted him, calling him foolish and pointing out that if the match had continued, Edmund would be dead by now. Edmund realized that Raoul had not been standing still but had been aiming for his neck. In fear, Edmund collapsed to the ground, and Raoul approached him, mentioning that they would need to have a discussion about his disrespect toward the county after the tournament. Later, when he arrived at their castle, Anna respectfully told him to rest well. However, as soon as he heard the door shut behind him, he couldn't contain his excitement and shouted in happiness because he had actually won. He opened his status with a smile, and the system showed him an update. The level of Ashton's swordsmanship mastery had increased to beginner level 9. Proudly, he thought to himself that his plan had worked. Utilizing the game's feature where he gained more experience points and mastery by battling stronger opponents, he understood that fighting against a stronger opponent for a longer duration would yield more experience points. He clenched his fist, acknowledging that his plan had succeeded because his game mode granted him an experience multiplier for removing the revive option, known as hardcore mode with high risk and high return. He examined his status, realizing that he had complained but now saw that he was currently level 19 hardcore, with classes in sword and psychokinetic. His affiliation was Ashton County, and his title was Ashton County's youngest son. His attributes were as follows: Strength 22, Agility 25, Stamina 19, Intelligence 15, Willpower 34, Mana 29, Spiritual Power 35, and Senses 30. He possessed unique traits such as Psychokinetic Meister S+, Royal Lineage A, and other unknown traits. He acknowledged that he wouldn't have been able to level up that much in a month if he had been in normal mode, but most importantly, he had 5 unique traits. He understood that Psychokinetic Meister was a trait that Bidoyan had, and Royal Lineage was a trait that Raoul possessed. He anticipated that the rest of his traits would unlock as he continued to level up. He decided to test these traits in his upcoming tournament matches. The tournament days arrived, and he won every match fairly and cleanly. The audience couldn't believe that the youngest son of Ashton had made it to the grand finale, wondering how it could be possible. Some speculated that he might be lucky or using some kind of trick, but he knows that early stage Connect civilians were unaware of the player's powers. Upon returning to their castle, he contemplated keeping his ability to use psychokinesis a secret until the players showed up. He confidently believed that he could conceal it with his acting skills. However, someone knocked on his door, introducing himself as Ivan. He invited Ivan inside, and Ivan expressed concern about his well-being, asking if he was injured. He assured Ivan that he was perfectly fine, mentioning the presence of a priest and healer on standby. Ivan placed a hand on his shoulder, advising him not to let his guard down and reminding him that there were wounds that couldn't be healed. He acknowledged Ivan's genuine worry but noted that he wasn't accustomed to such feelings in his past life. He then asked Ivan about the matter he had inquired about. Ivan handed him a document, confirming that he had fulfilled his request. Ivan inquired if he was sure about it and was about to mention Dion. But he interrupted Ivan, telling him not to worry because he was confident he would win. Ivan respectfully bowed to him, expressing his trust, and then left the room. Ivan walked away, reflecting that Raoul's confidence resembled Melvin's when he was younger. However, he knew that the final opponent would be Dion, who brutally wounded his opponents. Meanwhile, he examined the document, contemplating its value as it was related to Ashton County's betting system, which supported participants in the tournament. Placing the document on the table, he believed that it was enough to secure his place in the family, and all that remained was to defeat Dion. The host's voice echoed, announcing the beginning of the final match. He faces Dion and the audience. Half cheered for him, telling him to win with his skills, and he got it. But the other half tells him to be ready to get shit on by Dion. Dion calls him a weakling and tells him that he doesn't know how he made it that far, but he'll make sure that he considers it his worst decision to come up there. Dion also tells him that with people cheering, he will soon find out how worthless he is, and it'll be a nice view when he starts crawling with his limbs cut off. But he just yawns in response and asks Dion if he is done stretching his tongue. Raoul clenched his fist in anger and released a powerful violet aura while calling him an arrogant fucker, making the audience shout that it was overwhelming mana, and that Raoul is no match for Dion. But he thinks Dion is acting all tough because he saw that Dion's level is 42 with the class of Expert Knight, which is a sword user. His affiliation is Austin Viscounty. His title is Ashton Viscounty's Star and Sword Genius. Dion's stats are Potential Talent Grade B, Strength 52, Agility 41, Stamina 43, Intelligence 18, Willpower 14, Mana 32, and Senses 21, making him think that Dion's potential talent is only B, and Dion may look impressive now, but it was Dion's limit. The host shouted that the match had begun, and Dion angrily told him that he'd kill him, calling him a coward. But he just jumped toward Dion and appeared above Dion, making Dion surprised. Then he swung his sword down to attack Dion, but Dion blocked it. They both tried their hardest not to let their swords down first, but then he forcefully swung it down, making Dion slide back to avoid it. Dion angrily tells him that he is showing off, but he just keeps quiet, thinking that Dion's elasticity is below his expectations. They attack each other and block each other continuously, making him notice that Dion's strength is whatever. Dion angrily swung his sword toward him, but he dodged it in time, making Dion ask him why he hadn't hit him. He blocks Dion's sword, realizing that he can see Dion's sword clearly. Then he trips Dion using his feet, making Dion fall to the ground face first while he is busy thinking that a sword skill without any practical experience is called a generic nobleman's sword. He knows that Raoul was bullied by that Dion, while Dion asks him if he tripped him and releases his powerful aura again, telling him that he'll fucking kill him. But he calmly swings his body to the left, wondering if the only thing Dion knows is a mana sword with all that mana flowing through his body. The audience is shocked to see that he simply disarmed Dion's sword. Then he aimed his sword at Dion while releasing his blue and black aura and tells Dion that it was boring. He also tells Dion that he is really nothing after all, which makes Dion fume in anger and run toward him to attack. But he simply walks to the side and trips Dion once again, while telling him that he has anger issues and repeatedly falls for the same trick. Dion rolled around on the ground while he was calmly telling Dion to look at himself, and he was ashamed of County Austin's name. Dion once again ran toward him to attack, but he just powerfully punched Dion's face. Dion slowly fell and collapsed on the ground, making the audience unable to believe that Dion was down. Just like that, by Raoul. He tells the referee that the opponent is down and asks if he is going to continue the match. The referee shouts to everyone that the winner of the Ashton Coming of Age tournament was Raoul Ashton. Then the audience begins to shout to him that they believed in him and continuously shouted his name in celebration. He stumbled while thinking that he was happy he won, but he has awful stamina, making his people worried about him and immediately call a healer. Suddenly, the system popped up in front of him, showing him that the Coming of Age tournament quest had been completed and his rewards were experience points, 300 coins, and a random skill book, which is grade E or lower. Also, his extra rewards are experience points, 5 grade D stat points, and a random skill book, which is grade D or lower. The healers began to heal him while he was busy thinking that now he can make it to the Kingdom Academy. Ivan told Melvin that he was so proud of their young master and that Raoul had grown that much in a month. But Melvin just kept quiet, noticing that Raul had played around with Dion. And if Raul really got that far in a month, Raul was a genius. But then Melvin's thoughts were interrupted when Raul saw him. He called his father and waved hi to his father, thinking that Melvin was watching, and Melvin probably knew that he was good enough to go to the academy now. But Melvin just silently looked at him. Later, in the castle, Melvin tells him that he can't allow it, making him surprised and asking why. Then he tells Melvin that he thought he could go as long as he made it to the semi-finals. But Melvin tells him that it was situational, and from what he saw, he needed to stay by his side longer. Melvin also tells him that he fell after the match, so he should stay there a little longer. But he continues by telling his father that he learned about the sword as a lifelong journey. Then he asks his father if he doesn't always say it. Then he confidently tells Melvin that he is trying to go to the academy to learn more, just like he said, so he can't stop him, making Melvin stunned in surprise. But then Melvin smiles, realizing that Raul has really grown. Then Melvin stands up while telling him, "Okay, if you really want to go, you'll have to get past me." Then Melvin released his strong aura while aiming his sword at him and telling him that he won't go easy on him. Then he asks him, "What are you going to do now?" A month later, a lot of knights were behind the carriage and inside the carriage. He was glad that he was finally out. Then he remembered that when his father stopped him, he accepted it and confidently told his father that it was his choice. He charged at Melvin, but Melvin teasingly asked him if it was all he had. Then Melvin swung his sword away and released a more powerful aura while telling him that he'll show him a real sword skill. He then passed out from Melvin's strike. Melvin told him that it was just a sneak peek of what he had, but he knew that it was definitely Melvin's full strength. Then he remembered that Melvin's powerful 5th county lord died by the time the world of Connect started, and after that, the county fell quickly. So, in order to stop the fall, his father had to stay alive, and he would have to meet Melvin's expectations since he left him to leave. He swore that he would get stronger and protect his family because he couldn't lose it all. On the other hand, in the castle, Melvin was looking at him leaving and calling his name, remembering that in the training ground, he asked Raul how many times he had tried and told him to give up. But Raul replied that he'll never give up. He smiled while telling Raul that he'll compliment his persistence because it was worthy of the Ashton family's dignity. Raul raised his sword and ran toward him while he was telling Raul to strike him, but as he was about to block it, he noticed that the trajectory of Raul's sword changed midway, making him get hit a little in the face. Raul was frustrated that he could only leave a small wound even with psychokinesis, but then Melvin smilingly told Raul that he guessed it was about time to admit that Raul was no longer a kid, and that Raul was a proud swordsman, so he told Raul to go and witness the world. Later, they stopped in the forest to rest, and he asked Philip how far they were from the destination. Philip, who was 42 years old at level 92 with a class of High Knights and affiliations with Ashton County and the Golden Bear Order, with the title of Sword Breaker and potential talent grade S, Strength 82, Agility 76, Stamina 81, Intelligence 68, Willpower 77, Mana 76, and Senses 73, as well as unique traits including the strength of an ogre, skilled commander, and sword obsession, replied that at that speed, they would make it in 5 days and asked him if they should move faster. He replied that they needed to train the soldiers as well, so they should keep going at that speed, to which Philip replied that he understood. He thought that including him and his servants, his family had selected a total of 50 people. Of those, there were 3 regular knights, including Philip, 6 trainee knights, 15 trainees, and 20 cavalry. Also, all of them had grade B or higher potential talent. He knew that the number and skill levels weren't bad, and in order to stop the fall, they had to get stronger. A man named Jake told him that the maintenance for the carriage was done and they could get going whenever, to which he praised Jake for his good work. Jake asked them if they needed to bring that many people to that place for a month, but Philip told Jake to stop questioning their young master's order. Then he told Jake that he would know when they got there, leaving Jake more confused. But he knew the reason he was taking them to the free city, Mara, was because it was one of the first cities that players go to after finishing the tutorial. That city had many quests, hidden items, and mana usage limitations to prevent the unreasonable massacre of beginner players. Most of all, the resources were infinite, so the players went crazy about that place. God's Domain was a place full of monsters for players to grind. And God's Domain was the reason why Raul brought everyone to that city. He brought the knights to the grinding zone to level them up faster. He thought it was a perfect plan when the system popped up, showing him that the system had been updated. A new feature, Connect Community, had been unlocked, a new category, Guild, had been unlocked, and a new quest starting line, Adventure, and Skill Collector had been registered, amazing him because a new quest appeared as soon as he entered Mira. He thought he wouldn't be able to use any other features until the official launch, but he guessed maybe he could unlock more features if he met the requirements. Someone knocked on his carriage door, and Jake told him that he could meet the mayor right now. Then he was asked what he would like to do, and he replied that, of course, he'd meet the mayor. Meanwhile, in the main castle, the mayor of the free city, Reynaldo, asked who was there, and his butler replied that the youngest son of County Ashton, Raoul Ashton, had come to visit with 50 of his people. Reynaldo asked his butler if he meant the third son, who was known for being weak, and asked what Raoul was there for, suggesting it might be for the fresh air. Then he ordered his butler to let them in because Raoul's family made good money off monster materials, and he'd extract some money from Raoul. The butler replied that he understood. A moment later, someone opened the door and he gracefully greeted Reynaldo. Reynaldo warmly welcomed him and told him that he sincerely welcomed him to the free city, Mira. He shook Reynaldo's hand while thanking him, and Reynaldo told him to sit over there and talk. However, he thought Reynaldo was insincere and noticed an obvious fake smile on his face. Reynaldo asked him what had brought him to Mira, and he replied that he had heard there was an excellent place to train there. Reynaldo told him that, of course, there was, and he had come to the perfect place because Mira was the safest place to train. But he told Reynaldo that it couldn't be an ordinary place, and he would like to be permitted to enter the cursed forest, which shocked Reynaldo. Reynaldo told him that it was too dangerous, especially for a weakling, but then clarified that he meant it was for younger people. He replied that it was as he expected, and he guessed he had no choice but to throw away the 500,000 gold that he was going to give Reynaldo as a gratuity in the river, which left Reynaldo even more shocked to see 500,000 gold in front of him. Reynaldo immediately grabbed the bag of gold in his hand and told him that he was joking, explaining that the cursed forest would indeed be easy for him and his knights. He would give him permission to enter the forest. He smiled and told Reynaldo that he knew a generous mayor like him would permit them. He knew that the only thing left for him to do was grind and take all the rewards, so he'd be at the top of Connect soon. The knight arrived at the free city, Mira, and he was walking in the street with Jake and Philip. He was thinking that Mira was a place built for Connect players to live in, but there were no players there since it was a closed beta, except for him, Raoul Ashton, and because of it, the city was going through a crisis. He knew that there were many accommodations, large stores, larger guild buildings, and other facilities that were disproportionate to the number of people living there, and the land prices dropped because of all of it. But his real purpose for coming there was real estate. He thought that if he took over cheap lands in Mira, sooner or later they'd be used to build luxury houses for nobles, guild houses for players, and apartments for normal players to live in. Also, in the future, those lands would cost more than 100 times what they are now. He also knew that once the players came in and war broke out as it did in the past that he remembered, Mira, the city blessed by the gods, would become a perfect shelter. He remembered that in the past, they could make money by just lending land. But he thought it was still not enough because considering the upcoming war and potential risks, he had to be even more prepared. Then he told the powerful major guilds that he couldn't do anything against their financial prowess in his past life, but this time would be different. Later, Jake, sweating, asked him if he just had to sign right there and called his name while he was looking at Jake pissed. Then he angrily told Jake that everyone had signed except him and ordered him to just sign it, but Jake told him that his mother told him to be careful when signing papers. In the end, the lady put the documents together and told them that including him, a total of 51 had registered for the guild first. He thought that he had created the first guild in a world without players and the very first and most advanced guild. He looked at his people, knowing that they would get assistance from the system as members of the guild, and he was excited to see the confused look on their faces, while Jake was on the side, thinking that his mother was going to kill him. Later, in the Battle Association Mira branch office, he shouted that he was next. The lady welcomed him and asked how she could help him. He replied that he was there to see some skill books and asked the lady what the highest rank they had was. A skill book is a book with different skills written in them, and if they read carefully, they can learn the skill. The skills rank from F to S. The lady replied that their branch office offered up to rank C skill books, but rank C skill books could only be purchased by VIP customers. He asked the lady what the requirements were to be a VIP, and she replied that it could be achieved either through contributions to the association through quests or by making significant purchases. However, for stacking up purchases, he'd have to spend a lot. He asked the lady how much it was, and she replied that it was 10,000 gold. He placed the bag of gold on the table while telling the lady that it was not much and asked if he could see the D rank ones first. The lady happily asked him which line of skill books he would like to see first, whether it was sword, bow, magic, or shield. He smiled and replied that he wanted to see all of them. Later, Jake panted and said that it was too heavy, asking him if they really needed all those books, as they were all holding a swarm of books. He replied that he might think it was a bother now, but those books would advance them to a higher level. Jake told him that he guessed they were well-descriptive skill books, but asked him if they couldn't only train through books at the beginner level. Philip agreed with Jake, saying they could have bought power armor with the money spent on those books, but he assured them not to worry and to be patient, as they would know tomorrow. A moment later, he arrived at his apartment room and looked at the swarm of books in front of him, realizing that maybe it was too much. He knew that there were limits on the number of skills players could use. So normally, players couldn't use various skills. Then he opened his quest window, remembering that when he woke up in Raoul's body, there were 2 unknown items in the inventory, making him wonder what those items were. He had tried to open them, but he couldn't click on them or use them. However, yesterday, when he got the quest, he was finally able to use those items. He opened his inventory and found out that one of them was the sealed skill dex, making him guess that maybe the reward for that quest was the activation of the skill dex. Looking at the system, he saw that the quest collector had an unknown grade and a description telling him to collect at least 10 skill books and register them in the skill dex, with extra rewards depending on the type of skill books. His reward for completing it was skill dex activation, and his extra reward was unlocking traits and acquiring skills. He immediately grabbed some of the books, realizing that he had to open the dex and hold the skill book. Then he saw the register, and the dex book began to move on its own, surprising him. A strong purple light came out of it and flew directly into the other book. Words came out of the dex book, making him let go of the other book he was holding, unable to believe that it worked. Then he noticed that the sliver of mana in the book was gone, and it was going to take forever to do them all, wondering if there was a way to register them all at once. Suddenly, the books flew up in mid-air, shocking him. A strong purple light once again came out of the dex book and flew toward the books in mid-air. Then the books began to fall on the ground when it was done. He flipped the dex book's pages, wondering if it understood what he said, and couldn't believe that it actually worked. The system showed him that he had completed the quest, so his skill dex, which was rare, had been activated. For his extra reward, his trait skill collector, which was X, had been unlocked, and copycats, which were S, had been acquired. He clicked the skill collector and saw that its effect was to activate the skill dex, while the skill copycat slightly increased the chance of acquiring skills from the skill book. He then clicked on copycat and saw that its mastery was at beginner level 3. Its effect was to steal skills from the examined opponent, with examined skills being registered in the dex. As mastery went up, he could acquire higher ranked skills, and the power of the skill increased. He thought it was overpowered because he could steal and use someone else's skill. Then the system showed him that the skill dex was of a rare grade, and its status was upgradable and bounded. Its description stated that it was a replica of the mythic item skill dex that held records of ancient skills. These records would reset when crossing dimensions, and the dex would regain its true power after achieving special requirements. Currently, it recorded 525 skills. He knew it was the mythical item he had received right before he died. Some parts of his past life, like his psychokinesis trait and items, came with him, but his skills were reset, and this was a replica too. He also noticed that the only thing left in his inventory unknown was the 3 grade X traits and 1 item, making him wonder what kind of power it held. The next day, the knights were shocked to see the system and panically asked what the status window was and what the thing called guild chat was. They shouted that they needed to go see a priest. On the other hand, the butler welcomed him, and he stared at the butler with his sleepy eyes. He couldn't sleep all night because he was reading through the skill dex. He greeted Bernard and asked if he had explained it to them, to which Bernard replied that he had explained as instructed. He excitedly asked Bernard about the skill book and if he had tried it, to which Bernard nodded in agreement. He knew that Bernard was a servant of the Ashton family and Ivan's stepson. Bernard had been working for the county from a young age and was taught by Ivan himself. Bernard had a great memory and got things done quickly, but there was another reason why he had chosen Bernard. Then Bernard released wind from his hand, making him exclaim that it was amazing. He told Bernard that he knew he could do it, realizing that Bernard had the power to control the wind. Bernard gracefully replied that he was flattered. The system showed him that Bernard was 27 years old, at level 21, with classes in Servant, Beginner, and Windwalker. Bernard's affiliations were Ashton County and the First Guild. His talents included administration, management, and wind power. His potential talent was grade A, with stats including 17 for strength, 18 for agility, 24 for stamina, 53 for intelligence, 46 for willpower, 23 for spiritual power, and 41 for senses. His unique traits were sharp manager, cold-headed, and like the wind. He knew that Bernard might lack in certain stats, but he had great talent for being a servant or an esper. He was done with his preparations, so he told Bernard to get ready. Bernard confusedly asked him for what, and he replied that they were leaving as soon as the knights were used to it, heading to God's domain, the Cursed Forest. Later, in the cursed forest, an ogre launched its axe to attack him, and it broke the ground in the process. However, he dodged it and told the ogre that it was too slow. Then he launched his fist, but before his fist hit the ogre's head, it exploded. He got down on the ground at the same time the ogre's body collapsed and told the others to come out already. Then a swarm of ogres came out from hiding and shouted that he was a strong human and they should kill him. The leader of the ogres called everyone and ordered them to charge, which the ogres did, running toward him to attack at the same time. But he just positioned himself and told them to bring it on. The cursed forest, God's domain, and, to be specific, God's domain isn't just a grinding zone. It stands for the entire city of Mira because if players get hurt, they get healed, and if players die, they revive in that blessed city, which is why that city is the best shelter. Also, in the forest, the blessing only applies to monsters, so the number of monsters stays the same even after they are killed. Humans can't be revived in the cursed forest and can't walk outside the forest with the items they get from hunting monsters because if they take them outside, the items turn into ashes and disappear. This means that they are not supposed to touch the property of the gods. However, it only applies to civilians. Players can take items they get from monsters outside the forest with the system's assistance. Philip asks Jake why he is talking when their young master is the one fighting them all. On the other hand, he was busy fighting the ogres, and when the leader was the only one left, it asks him what is that power. But he just raises the weapons on the ground with his power and asks the leader if it meant that power. The leader was shocked to see the weapons flying straight to him, and the leader got cut into pieces by them. Then he tells it that it was called psychokinesis, together with Jake. Jake tells him that it is a convenient ability, but Philip tells Jake to stop talking and keep skinning the ogres. Jake sighed and said that he didn't come all the way to Mira to do that, and explained that he guessed they had made good progress from that training. Jake calls him while he is busy collecting the blood of the ogres, and he laughingly thanks them and tells them that it was possible because of everyone's help. All of them could get stronger by studying the skill books, to which Philip thinks that Raoul was right and remembers that he was swinging his dagger forward and used the Hanjutsuzen skill to attack the ogre, making the ogre cut in half. Raoul asked him how is it and explained to him that it was why he brought skill books instead of power armor, to which he replied that it was amazing. Philip knows that he learned a skill so quickly and wonders how Raoul found out about that strange ability. But then the system showed him the guild chat, and he was surprised to read a chat from someone. Then he immediately tells Raoul to look at the guild chat, but when he looks at Raoul, he fumes in anger while telling him that he saw it too and they are going back to Mira now. Meanwhile, in Mira, at their apartment, someone pointed a sword at one of Raoul's men and said that he should have done it earlier. Then the man stabbed Raoul's man with the sword, saying that it was hard holding himself back after seeing Ashton's kids walking around. Another man, holding a bloody sword, called the man's brother, telling him that they should have listened to him earlier, then they could have done it way sooner while stabbing another of Raoul's men. One of Raoul's men asked the men why they were doing it, but another man just slashed Raoul's man with the sword while asking his brother if their great-grandfather didn't tell them to be mindful, and reminded them that they were all there because they had made a scene. The man named Ramon was Randall Viscounty's first son. The man named Jerry was Randall Viscounty's second son, and the man named Cale was Randall Viscounty's third son. Raoul's man, who was on the ground, told Ramon that they would regret it. But before the man could finish his words, Ramon stabbed him and pulled out the sword immediately, making the man shout in pain. Ramon continuously stabbed the man while laughing, telling him to tell Raoul to hurry up because they also had some business with their young master. Then Ramon said that it was strange that they kept reviving while looking at the man who was healing on the ground and calling them bastards. Jerry laughingly told his brothers that they should take care of that Raoul kid like that. But Cale told Jerry that he thought noble families weren't supposed to point swords at each other in the free city. Ramon just asked Cale what was the matter when they could just say they never did it and what were they going to do about it. Ramon also told his brothers that if they thought about it, it was good, and they could just crush the Ashton family. Then Ramon excitedly turned to his brothers, saying that maybe their great-grandfather would even compliment them. However, as Ashton's head exploded into pieces, Cale called his brothers in shock. They looked back and saw Raoul asking them how dare they, and telling them that it was an offense towards Ashton County, so they would have to pay back with more than just worthless deaths. The brothers looked at him in surprise, and Jerry asked him if he was crazy and how dare he touch a son of the Randall family. Then Cale asked what the knights were doing and how Raoul even got there. One of the knights, who had a sword pointed at his neck, fearfully replied that they thought they were the Ashton family's main force, while Philip and Jake pointed their swords at them. Philip reported to him that they had surrounded the Randall Knights as he ordered and made sure there were no civilians nearby. Bernard and Jake stood silently, looking at the enemy. He praised them for their good work and used his psychokinesis to grab his injured men from the ground and slowly lifted them up in mid-air. Then he ordered Bernard to take them to the shrine, to which Bernard respectfully agreed. He then opened his inventory and pulled out his sword, telling them that he would clean up the garbage himself. He knew that Randall Viscounty was similar to Ashton County. They were one of the 5 warrior families of the Reuben Kingdom. However, unlike the Ashton family, the Randall family didn't have a long history, and the 4 warrior families were reorganized into the 5 warrior families when the current lord of the family, Viscount Hudson D. Randall, reached the Swordmaster stage. As a family with a short history, they had to figure out various ways to ensure their place. They consistently produced great knights, made respectable contributions, and crushed their opponents. The opponent they had targeted was the Ashton County, which had lost its power since it hadn't produced a Swordmaster in a long time. There were no risks in agitating them since the Ashton family was the least politically inclined. Many conflicts between these 2 families across the kingdom were mostly started by the Randall family, and everyone expected Randall Viscounty to win, given their numerous sword masters. So, the people of Randall thought the same would happen here. Jerry, who was looking at him, wondered about that unusual strength and noticed that he had pulled a sword out of the air. The knight behind him, who had a sword pointed at him by Philip, looked at him and slowly grabbed the sword. However, he felt it in time and turned around, swinging his sword and hitting the knight, making the knight shout in pain. The Randall knights were shocked to see it, and Jake put his sword back in the sheath, saying that their young master said he would take care of them himself and ordered his men to put down their swords. One of Randall's strong knights noticed that they were really putting away their swords and wondered if they were insane because he thought it was better for them. Cale furiously ran toward him, asking if he was going to fight them by himself and swung his huge mace backward to gain force. He told him that it wasn't training, but then a sharp sword slash flew toward Cale, and Cale got cut in half before he could attack, making Cale shout in pain, and Jerry called Cale's name in worry. Jerry called their knights bastards and asked them why they were just standing there. The leader made a frustrated sound and slowly pulled his sword, saying that he guessed he had to act. He explained that he had hesitated because he didn't want to bully a 15-year-old kid, but when his comrades were going down, it wasn't right. The system displayed the man's name as Jeremy, a 37-year-old man, level 65 with the class of Leader of Guard Knights and Beginner Sword Expert. His affiliations were Randall Viscounty and Randall Knights. His potential talent was Grade B, his strength was 66, his agility was 72, his stamina was 68, his intelligence was 48, his willpower was 63, his mana was 70, his senses were 55, and his unique trait was brutality, graded as C. Then the other knights also raised their swords at him. He knew that Jeremy was the Randall family's main weapon, called the rapier, and he guessed that the men were the elites. Jeremy and the knights were aiming their swords at him. He knew that Jeremy's level was 65, and the other elites were each at level 60. However, his current level was 45, so he couldn't win against them normally. One of the knights asked him why he didn't stop now because he thought he had done enough. The other knight told him that they had let him be, but no more. He didn't care even if he was a young master, but he suddenly appeared in front of the knight, surprising him. He then slashed the knight's body, tightly grabbing his sword and raising it backward to gain force. He uses his bear aura and attacked them with his bear strike skill. One of the knights asked him what he was doing, but he just slashed the man's stomach, making the man bleed and shout in pain. Then Jeremy jumped toward him, appearing right in front of him to attack, surprising him. However, he managed to block Jeremy's attack in time, getting pushed back because of it. Jeremy asked his man if he was okay, and the man fearfully replied that he was fine. Jeremy couldn't believe that 2 of his elites went down so easily. He remembered that he had heard Raoul was weak and didn't know how to wield a sword. Then Jeremy pulled out his other weapon and told him that he was different from the rumors, so he'd have to get serious now. He pointed his sword at Jeremy and told him to bring it on. He looked at Jeremy and noticed that Jeremy was holding a parrying dagger and a rapier, making him wonder if Jeremy was using Randall Viscounty's sword skill called Shooting Star. Jeremy smiled and told him that he liked his bravery and asked if he knew that every wound healed in Mira. Then he told him that he couldn't fight them all alone. However, he just told Jeremy that he thought he was the one confused and bet that he and his knights hadn't even trained since arriving in Mira, making Jeremy surprised and asking how he knew it. He told Jeremy that those soldiers over there, shaking in their boots even after their wounds had healed, were living proof that they were not used to death. Jeremy pointed his weapons toward him, thinking that he didn't just know about combat, but could see through everything, which meant he was a threat. He ordered his man to cover him from the back, and the man told Jeremy to leave it to him. Then Jeremy jumped and launched his sword toward him. He covered himself with his sword, and Jeremy, with his man, continuously attacked him, slashing his face, arm, and every part of his body. The man saw an opening and ran forward to attack him, making Jeremy surprised and shouting to his man to stop. But he swung his sword forward, and the man got cut in half. Jeremy called his man a fool, but he knew there was no time to waste, so he used his Randall sword vision skill and activated the Shooting Star skill, making him surprised for a second. but then he blocked himself with his sword, mentally telling Jeremy to bring it on. Jeremy continuously attacked him with Shooting Star, a powerful skill known for its 1v1 combat prowess. He noticed that he was struggling even with psychokinesis, but he knew he had to keep up, wondering how when he was definitely dominating that fight. He planned to press Jeremy all the way back, glaring at Jeremy, making Jeremy pissed and shouting, asking him what was up with his arrogant eyes. But he just replied, 100%, making Jeremy confusedly ask him what he meant. Then he swung his sword forward, making Jeremy throw his weapons in the air, and Jeremy immediately looked up to see his weapons. He pierced his sword into the ground, and the system showed him that his opponent's skill examination had been 100% completed, and the copycat was ready for use. Then the system showed him to copy the exact moves using the copycat to engrave the skill into the decks. He used his psychokinesis to grab Jeremy's weapons in the air, making Jeremy surprised. Then the weapons flew directly into his hands, while the system showed him to activate the copycat Randall sword skill Shooting Star, grade B. He angrily activated it while pointing the weapons at Jeremy, and the Shooting Star skill attacked Jeremy in return, making Jeremy shockingly ask how he did it, knowing that it was definitely Shooting Star. Jeremy covered the attack with his arms in pain, shouting and asking who had betrayed them, and taught Raoul that sword skill while being continuously hit by the Shooting Star skill. Suddenly, he appeared beneath Jeremy and told him that he taught him himself, making Jeremy confusedly ask what he meant. However, he just stabbed Jeremy in the side and pulled it out, making Jeremy kneel on the ground. The system showed him that he had received a rank S bonus called Randall Sword Skill Shooting Star Grade B Mastery, leveling up to Intermediate Level 1. He had successfully engraved Randall Sword Skill Shooting Star, grade B, into the skill decks. It also told him to equip the skill in the skill deck selection slot to use Randall Sword Skill Shooting Star, grade B, continuously. He looked at Jeremy, thinking that it was over and that using the rank S skill Copycat was hard since it was overpowered. He knew that Copycat was a skill he learned with the skill decks that copied the opponent's skill, but it could only copy one skill at a time, and he couldn't lose sight of the target once the skill was activated. If he lost sight of the target, the examination rate would reset, which was why he didn't even blink when he was taking Jeremy's attacks. It was also impossible to steal a skill unless it was a one-on-one fight. He opened his display skill, and the system showed him that his default skill slots were 1. Ashton Vision Sword Skill Bear Crush, which was grade A plus at Intermediate Level 2. 2. Psychokinesis, which was grade S at Intermediate Level 2. 3. Ashton Mind Skill, which was grade A at Intermediate Level 1. 4. Copycat, which was grade S at Beginner Level 6, and 5. Basic Meditation, which was grade E at Beginner Level 8. Then his skill deck select slots were Flash and Shield, which were both grade C at Beginner Level 6. Finally, his skill deck's random slot was Iron Fist, grade D at Intermediate Level 1. He was grateful for his skill decks because he could use 3 more skills, and the selection slots allowed him to freely use 2 skills registered in the skill decks. He decided to use it there, but then he heard something by his side, making him look there in confusion. Jerry fearfully asked him who he was and how he used the Randall sword skill. However, he just told Jerry that he was still there because he had forgotten about him. He ordered Philip to kill them every time they revived for an hour, to which Philip respectfully agreed and asked his men if they had heard their young master. He ordered them to kill them, to which his men immediately agreed. Jerry begged Philip for forgiveness and fear, but he just stared at them, thinking that it was blood for blood. Then the enemy screamed in pain while he was thinking that it wasn't Earth or a game, but the reality that had been presented to him. He knew that he had to do everything to not lose it again, even if that meant wading through a pool of blood. He was determined not to lose. On the other hand, Reynaldo, who was watching everything from a distance, wondered what in the world was going on right now. He remembered that according to the plan, when those Randall Viscounty's guys attacked that bastard Raoul, he was supposed to get his share after mobilizing the guards to help. However, Raoul beat up 15 knights on his own. Suddenly, Raoul looked in his direction, making him bend down in panic, and he wondered how Raoul found out he was there. Reynaldo also wondered if Raoul wasn't just a rich and good-looking pushover. He contemplated if, by any chance, Raoul had hidden a swordmaster of the county, because if that were the case, Raoul must have figured out all his plans as well. He calmed himself down and thought that he'd have to be friendly with the Ashton County in the future. A few minutes later, he was in his room, thinking that he had overdone it a bit. But those rewards were pretty good. While looking at the system showing him the results for his sudden quest, Rival Family Challenge, he saw that his rescue and punishment were complete. So, he received a reward of experience points, 30,000 coins, and a random B-grade skill book draw ticket. On top of that, he received about 5,000 gold, a space-expanding magic bag capable of holding a carriage's worth of luggage, and a unique grade rapier and main ghost set from those Randall County scoundrels. He grabbed the ticket, remarking that the B-grade skill book draw draw ticket was especially nice, and wondered if he had received all flunks from the tournament skill book rewards because even thinking about it now was ridiculous. He placed the ticket on the table and expressed that he didn't need something amazing, but at least it should be a mid-tier one this time. Then, he broke the ticket in half while praying that it wasn't a flunk. The ticket released a bright light, and he was surprised to see that he had acquired a skill book called Rivera Spearmanship Grade B, which made him shout in happiness. He knew that spearmanship was a necessary skill in his next destination, the capital, and told himself that his luck was following him. Then he thought that there was only one more important thing he had to do in Mira now, and he had to invest 1 month there for it. But he swore that he would make sure to succeed. A week later, he was in the forest, launching his sword and attacking the ogre in front of him. He wiped his sweat while the system showed him that he had leveled up, reaching level 51. Additionally, he had achieved the level necessary for promotion, so he needed to decide on the possible promotion. Then the system showed him that it confirmed his job as a sword user and as a beginner psychokinetic. Also, his proficiency in job-related skills, including Ashton family hereditary swordsmanship, Randall swordmanship, and psychokinetic, had increased to mid-level 2. He had satisfied the promotion requirements, so his job sword user had changed into sword expert, and his beginner psychokinetic had changed into intermediate psychokinetic. Philip tells him that it's amazing, and Jake tells him that it's awesome because he became a sword expert at 15 years old. He raises his hand in the air, causing the stones on the ground to begin floating. Then he swings his hand forward while shouting, "Go!" and the stones strike the huge tree in front of him, causing it to explode into pieces. Next, he pulls out his sword, leaps forward, and activates his bear strike, hitting the ground with it, causing the ground to shatter into pieces. He looks at the cracked, destroyed ground and asks his men if it should be like this. Philip tells him that it was wonderful, as he expected from their young master, and Jake playfully asks him if he can now do it without them. Then Jake suggests that they should take a breather and relax, but Philip tightly grabs Jake's ear and asks him what he means by relax. He tells Jake that he should think about how much he has to sleep to catch up with Raoul. Jake shouts that it was just a joke and laughs, telling Philip that since their young master has worked so hard, he was just suggesting that they can take it easy. Philip insists that Jake was all talk, making him awkwardly laugh. Then, he tells Jake that regardless of whether it was a joke or not, he doesn't plan on taking a break yet. Philip asks him what he would like to do, and Jake suggests they contact the family because Count Melvin would be thrilled. He replies that he'll tell his family himself later and suggests they keep it a secret between them for the time being, to which they both agree. He knows that he has hunted enough monsters and leveled up sufficiently. Meanwhile, Philip angrily tells Jake to watch his words, making Jake pout and ask Philip what he means. He also realizes that he has set all the bait, and now all that remains is for the prey to take it. He tells them that they should go back now, to which they both agree. Then, they walk away while urging the dogs of the Empire to hurry up and move, in his mind. Meanwhile, in the streets of Mira, bustling with people, a lady named Nakia, an alchemist, stretches her body, saying that it marks the end of today's work. She notices that the potions are very popular these days and wonders if it's all thanks to the Ashton County who brought them there. She knows that in order to produce potions, monster byproducts are needed, and as monsters rarely appear in the Cursed Forest, she wasn't able to easily obtain them all this time. But thanks to the Ashton County's people who started bringing the monster byproducts, she has been able to produce potions every day. Not only that, but the county's people stop by the village shop every morning, asking if anything had happened throughout the night, inquiring if she needed anything, and checking on her well-being in general. She steps out of the store and thinks that Raoul is a bit strange, but she is grateful to him, and Raoul is good looking too. She slaps her face in shyness, asking herself what she is thinking, and tells herself to get it together because Raoul is just 15 years old and is 8 years younger than her. Also, Raoul is a noble, which makes the people around her look at her strangely. A moment later, she arrives at her house, happily opens the door, and calls out to someone named Nikki, telling her that her sister is back. However, no one answers, causing her to worry. She looks around and calls Nikki again, but then notices something that fills her with fear. She sees a letter on the bed, pierced by a knife. She reads the letter, which tells her that they have taken her little sister and that if she wants to save her, she shouldn't tell anyone about it and should wait for further instructions. This makes her cry and worry while saying no. Then, she immediately ran out while crying, knowing that Nikki's life would be in danger if she went outside the city. She had heard about many reports of kidnappings, which the city government claimed to be investigating. but she never thought the rumors were true. She wondered where she should go when she couldn't go to the city government. She realized there was a chance that the kidnappers were watching her, and the guards wouldn't even bother going outside the city even if she told them. Also, if she asked the mercenaries of the Adventurer Guild, it would take a while for them to act, making her wonder what she should do. Then, she remembered Raoul telling her that if she ever found herself in trouble, she should come find him. She knew it was her only option, so she ran away quickly, determined to go see Raoul. Meanwhile, in an apartment, the system showed him that Nakia was heading toward him, making him think that it had come to this. He ordered everyone to get into their positions, stay on their targets, and report any changes, to which all his men replied with a swift yes. He opened his access to the Connect community and clicked the link to the cafe. He knew it was a premium member-only information cafe that he had run in his past life. Since he was a star player, he could get useful information from his fans and informants. As a result, the cafe became an information treasury that held almost every hidden piece of information in Connect. He thought he had hit the jackpot when he saw that the cafe still existed. He knew he could use it instead of relying on his uncertain memories to plan better. He searched for the link to the free city, Mira, and the system showed him that the search result was a quest starting point at South Mira NPC. He was confident that he had checked every quest he could possibly take, so now he had to hope everything went as planned. One of his men reported to him that Nakia was there, making him wonder if he could change Nakia's future. He shyly ordered his men to treat her politely. He knew that Nakia, the crazy alchemist, blood-hungry witch, and taboo destroyer, was a subject of fear for everyone. She didn't hesitate to conduct experiments on humans for her revenge against the Empire, and the Empire was the main target of her chemical weapons. However, many innocent civilians also got involved. But Nakia was now just a desperate girl asking him for help. He put his hand on her shoulder, telling her to calm down and assuring her that Nikki would be fine. He promised to help, so she should explain what had happened. Nakia told him that her sister had been kidnapped, and Nikki should have been home 2 hours ago since the lady next door was taking care of her. She begged him to find her sister because Nikki was just a poor kid, and it was all her fault. He told her not to worry and swore that he would make sure they found Nikki because he believed he knew where Nikki was, leaving her shocked and begging him to save Nikki. He assured her that he would let her know as soon as he found Nikki, so she should stay there, and Bernard would help her. Bernard gracefully told her to inform him if she needed anything, emphasizing that she had made an excellent choice because their young master always kept his promises. Then they began to head out, and Philip reported to him that Pierce was tracking them down and had obtained permission to operate from Mayor Reynaldo. He responded by saying that it was nice. The system showed them that the raid quest was Free City Mira with grades D to B. The objective was to defeat unknown rogues, and the additional objective was to rescue hostages and raid the hideouts in the forest. The description stated that an unknown group of rogues was active in the forest around Mira City, and Mayor Reynaldo had requested a raid on the rogues responsible for kidnapping and interfering with trade. The rewards for completing the quest included a large amount of experience points, coins, recognition from the mayor, and unknown items. He asked Philip if he had given Reynaldo the list of rogues, and Philip replied that Reynaldo had mentioned he would reward them for it later, expressing surprise at the information provided. He had given Reynaldo the list of rogues hidden in the city, using information from his informants and data from the cafe link. Knowing he had already used many resources, he ensured there were no holes in their plan. He then instructed his men to proceed, and Jake excitedly agreed, unaware that 2 people were hiding in the bushes, spying on them. One of the men communicated something to his comrade. Meanwhile, in the forest, someone walked, catching the attention of Pierce, Ashton County Golden Bear Knights, and Raoul's Guard Knights, along with the other Bear Knights men. Pierce believed he had found it based on the traces on the ground, and it was time to initiate their operation. He leaped high and landed on a tree branch, planning to use the new skill he had learned. Activating his detection skill, he began searching the forest. To his shock, he spotted men hiding nearby, armed with bows and arrows. He also observed phantom magic circles and barriers, recalling what Raoul had told them, and knew he had to report it. He read Raoul's message, indicating they would be there in 5 minutes, prompting him to think back to 5 months ago. He knew that Raoul was the youngest son and that Raoul was known for his perceived weakness and lack of talent compared to his brothers. Many servants and knights were initially reluctant to travel with Raoul, and even when Raoul was seeking volunteers, few seemed interested for a long time. However, Raoul visited the Knights' training ground and personally spoke to the Knights. During his conversation with Pierce, Raoul mentioned that he could help Pierce reach his limits because Pierce had expressed a desire to surpass his current capabilities. He remembered how Raoul had wielded Pierce's sword himself and started pointing out the issues. He recalled thinking that while Raoul had expressed a desire to surpass his limits, he wondered how a kid like Raoul could teach him anything. Nonetheless, he decided to give it a try. When he swung his sword, he was surprised to find that every move felt smoother. He remembered Raoul's advice about learning Bear Crush, emphasizing that his strength lay in agility, not power. Raoul had suggested that he polish his bow skills, as he had heard Pierce was a talented bowman. Few people knew about his bow skill, yet Raoul had noticed it. This made him wonder if Raoul was the one who could genuinely help him, so he chose to follow Raoul. He was sure it was the best decision he had made, and he believed that those who had declined Raoul's offer were probably regretting it now. He didn't understand why Raoul had been hiding his power, but with the skill books Raoul had provided, he had reached the high expert stage and was able to practice his other skills. It would have been impossible without Raoul's guidance. He speculated that today might be the glorious day when Raoul would reveal his true strength. However, he noticed someone approaching, so he immediately jumped off the tree branch and gracefully bowed, along with the other knights, respectfully calling out that he had arrived. He looked ahead, and the system indicated that it was an unknown rogue's hideout with an unknown grade and size. Its status showed a 3-circle or higher magic circle interfering with vision, and a 3-circle magic that interrupted anyone who approached. He had to decide whether to destroy the magic circle or find a way to enter to gather more information. He noted that hideouts looked the same even in different cities and that spies from the Cranian Empire were hiding in Mira. While most Connect players received quests from starting cities like Mira, offering rewards for killing monsters or rogues, there were unusual rogues in the mix. These included a slave trader who kidnapped people in the city and mercenaries aiming to make it big. However, the most dangerous of them all were the Cranian Empire's spies, known as the Imperial Hounds, who hunted players and blackmailed them to prevent them from gathering together. They were crucial in the late game, and he couldn't let them be. He called Pierce, who immediately aimed his arrows and released them, hitting the men hiding behind the magic circle. They entered the barrier, and he noticed that there was no one near the entrance. He considered dispelling the magic circle with a scroll he had bought from the shop but hesitated when he saw the mana flow. He wondered if he could do it. He put the scroll back in his jacket, deciding to infuse mana into his weapon. He grabbed his dagger from his inventory and launched it toward the mana flow. It slowly cracked due to his attack, and then he stabbed the magic circle on the ground with his dagger, destroying it. He thought it was nice because, instead of buying scrolls, he could save money. Pierce expected this of their young master and called the men named Jackson and Nil to follow the plan and lure the enemies as they had discussed. He assured them that he would let them know when to enter, to which they both agreed. Pierce descended from the tree branch and walked with them, feeling confident because he had elite knights with him. He told himself that they should hunt them all in his mind. A moment later, they arrived at the huge door. He told everyone that they don't need captives, so they will hunt them all, and they shouldn't forget to use the rapier for the last blow. Jake tells him that he doesn't understand why they should use a stick, but he will follow his orders, even though it doesn't seem to be a task where they need to use weapons. He just orders Pierce to watch there for them and find where the kidnapped people are because they need to save Nakia's younger sister named Nikki, and he should prioritize Nikki, to which Pierce replied that he got it. Then he calls Philip, and Philip nods in agreement. Then he used his psychokinesis while telling them that they should go in and open the huge door in front of them. Then they proceed to walk in while Pierce is looking back. They just continued walking inside the tunnel until he saw the hideout inside and looked at Pierce, which Pierce understood and slowly faded away. The system showed him that Pierce had successfully infiltrated the opponent's base, making him think that they should start hunting now. He looks up and notices that there is a high cave ceiling and wooden fences spread around. Then the rogues' levels there are around 30 to 31, which is not much different from regular thieves, and since he has checked the base, he should give the orders. Then he raised his hand to Jake and Philip, which means he was giving the orders. Then he ordered Jake to go to the left, then Philip to go straight, and he will go to the right. Then he closed his fist, and they all ran toward their designated directions. He speedily ran upstairs, then jumped, making the men at the top wonder who it was, but he appeared above them in a flash before they could react and threw his knives at their heads. Then he landed on the stair handle, immediately grabbed his bow and arrow behind him, aimed it at the man, and released it to kill the man, while in the center, Philip was busy slashing the men, and on the left side, Jake was doing the same thing. But someone on the top saw them and shouted that there were intruders. Then the man ordered the guards to protect the fences and ordered them to kill them. He attacked them with his arrows, realizing that their numbers were increasing and they were starting to block his arrows too. One of the rogues called his companion to aim at him and shoot him down, and he was surprised to see arrows heading toward him. But he just used his psychokinesis and stopped the arrows from flying toward him, making one of the rogues panicky, asking if he bounced off the arrows, and his companion to get some backup from downstairs. The rogues ran toward the stairs to attack him, and one of the men shouted that arrows didn't work on him, so they should jump on him and attack. He put back the bow on his back, guessing that he'd have to use it now. Then he grabbed the daggers on his chest and put them in his hands together. One of the rogues was in front of him and ready to attack him, but he just pushed the man away, and the man was thrown back to his comrade, making everyone surprised. Then he used his psychokinesis to lift the arrows on the ground, then raised them slowly on his side, and then he flew using his power while holding the daggers in his arms and arrows around him. One of the rogues asked if it was magic and shouted that it was impossible. He positioned the arrows around him and aimed all of them at the rogues beneath him. Then he released the arrows together, hitting a lot of rogues. He looks at them struggling while reaching into his inventory, thinking it is still not powerful enough, so he has to exert more force on it to pierce through the armor. Then he jumped off the stair handle and appeared above the man who was trying to run away. He stabbed the man with his rapier while wondering where the others were. Then he looked back and saw Philip and Jake killing the rogues, while the rogues shouted for their companions to run because there were monsters there. The man begged for help when he saw Jake holding the rapier, but Jake just angrily slashed the man with it, making him shocked and sigh, knowing that Jake was rebelling to show that he didn't want to use the rapier. Jake didn't have to make such movements that waste mana. Also, Ashton tells Jake several times not to do that to avoid leaving any traces of swordsmanship, but he doesn't think he has to be too worried. Then he noticed someone sneaking an attack from behind without knowing that Pierce is hiding, and Pierce hits the man with his arrow in time before the man attacks Jake from behind, making him think that they are almost done taking care of the small fries. A few minutes later, Pierce apologizes to him because they searched the whole prison, but they couldn't find Nikki. He puts his hand on Pierce's shoulder while telling him that it is okay and asks him if he explained things to the captive villagers. Pierce replied yes, and they distributed the clothes and food and told them to wait in one place until the battle ended. Jake asks him if he thinks there are other enemies and if they aren't just thieves. He replies that they are thieves but asks Jake back if he thinks it was a little weird, making Jake ask him what he means by weird. He explained that first, Nikki, who was kidnapped, wasn't there, second, there were many of them, but none of them stood out among the rest, and lastly, there was a magic circle at the entrance, making him ask them if anyone saw a wizard there, but they all shake their heads no. He tells them that, in conclusion, the important people and captives are in another place. Jake tells them that it is true, but if they can't find that place, it'll all be useless, and asks Pierce if he thinks so. Pierce replied that he actually checked some suspicious-looking places, but he couldn't find anything with his abilities, and there could be a high-level magic circle or system. He proudly told Pierce that it hadn't even been a month since he became their guild member, but he was good, and soon, no one will be able to fool his eyes, to which Pierce thanked him. Then he smilingly tells them to follow him because he thinks he knows where they are hiding. Then he proceeded to walk, to which they followed him and ordered them to search that hut and report right away if they saw something suspicious. They all replied with an okay. A moment later, he opened the room door while Philip told him that they couldn't find anything suspicious, but he just asked them if it was the fourth hut. He pulled out the rapier from his inventory while telling his people to get ready because the real thing begins now. Then he kicked the table away, lifted his rapier with both hands, and pierced it into the floor hard. The floor shattered into pieces, showing the hidden door. He opened them with his psychokinesis and saw that it was a secret staircase leading to the basement. But then he heard something moving underground, so he told them that something was coming. Suddenly, a huge monster's hand came out of the underground and tried to grab Jake, making Jake panic and ask what it was. Then Jake jumped away in time before it could squeeze him, and the huge monsters came out of the hole, growling at them. The other monsters walked upstairs while Philip told them not to step away because it would be harder to fight them if they scattered. Then the monster launched forward to attack them, but he jumped forward to attack it with his rapier, and pierced it hard, making it scream in pain and push backward. Philip told them that those are the Imperial Demon Cavalry and their vital points are different from humans, so they should aim for their heads. Then Jake attacked the Demon Cavalry from behind while asking what they were doing in that place. On the other hand, he jumped at one of the Demon Cavalry with his rapier, thinking that he should study their traits first, and pierced his rapier into the Demon Cavalry's neck, making it slam on the ground hard and shout in pain. Then the system showed him that it was an incomplete Imperial Demon Cavalry, level 41 with Type 1 Crane and Imperial Demon Cavalry. It was what he'd expected, and he remembered that he had a hard time in the past because of those guys. He also remembered that in his past life, he, Bidoyan, attacked the Empire hideout in the starting city on his 6th month of playing the game. It was due to the mayor's request when the top players were about to graduate from the starting city. Tens of top players who had finished changing jobs for the second time formed a punitive force with hundreds of guild alliances and took over the fortress. But when the real Imperial Demon Cavalries who were hiding showed up, most of the players got wiped out immediately, and the rankers, including him, barely got away. No one was able to go near the Empire's hideout for 6 months after that. The Demon Cavalry that showed up that time was complete, and their average level was near 50. Of course, it was hard for players who had barely reached level 50 to handle it. But now, the demon cavalry is incomplete and they have lower levels. Also, his escorts are expert high-class knights who are over level 80. More importantly, he can see the vital points of the demon cavalry that are randomly placed. Then he ran to meet the demon cavalry running toward him, jumped higher, and stabbed all of its vital points, knowing that all he had to do was stab at the vital points. A moment later, the Imperial demon cavalry was wiped out. Jake angrily kicked the dead demon while Philip asked why the Imperial demon cavalry was in a place that is akin to the kingdom's front yard and asked him what they should do. He told them that they would go in and they couldn't back out now. Pierce suggested they should at least get some backup, but he disagreed and explained that the captives would be in more danger the longer it takes. So, they have to take care of them before they get in touch with the others outside. Suddenly, Philip and Jake walked forward to him while holding shields and told him to stay behind them because they would handle the enemies, and he should just focus on searching with Pierce. He thought it was a shame, but he knew that it was not the time to be greedy. He would still get a part of the experience points even if he didn't kill them himself, so he saw it as his chance to get carried because he had worked hard until now. Then Philip and Jake walked down first, making him feel great to have such reliable subordinates. He followed behind them, and when Jake opened the door, he told them that they should kill them in frying stool water. They then saw a lot of dead people on the ground, small and huge tubes filled with green water, with parts of monsters and demon cavalry inside them. Pierce told them that they were fearless for conducting chimera research in another country's territory. He mentioned that the demon cavalry they fought must have been made from the citizens they kidnapped, but he didn't expect them to be that crazy. He looked around, thinking that he had seen these kinds of scenes several times in his past life. However, it still creeped him out. In fact, he had considered joining them when he reincarnated because they would seize supremacy over that continent in about 10 years from now. But their emperor was a madman, and becoming his subordinate would be the same as jumping into a fire with a bomb in hand. He knew that there were many baseless rumors about the emperor, but he was sure about one thing: the emperor didn't view humans as humans. All the humans who didn't carry royal blood were divided into classes depending on their worth, and they suffered all their lives doing labor. When they became useless, they were used as experimental subjects or food for the Imperial demon cavalry. And of course, even high-class citizens, if they did something that bothered the emperor, were executed. There was a general who had complained about the emperor's tyranny, but while he was talking with the king, the tattoo on his shoulder glowed red, spreading, and then he exploded and died. He remembered it vividly as if he had been there. He had no plans of surviving by sticking beside someone like it, and he couldn't allow experiments on innocent civilians. Suddenly, Philip called him to look down, and when he looked, he was surprised to see magicians casting a spell, while a knight ordered them to activate it because they had to secure the exit route. Pierce used his skills and reported that there were 4 knights, 3 wizards, and 10 Imperial demon cavalry. Also, it seemed like the wizards were trying to activate the magic circle in front of the cave. Philip told them that he would take care of the knights, ordered Pierce to take care of the wizards, instructed Jake to deal with the Imperial demon cavalry pursuing him, and told him to back them up. Jake poutingly told Philip that he wanted him to clean up the mess from behind. But when Philip glared at Jake in anger, Jake looked at his side and sweat. Then Pierce began by shooting his arrow at one of the wizards, and someone shouted that there were intruders. They all jumped down while he was ordering them to attack. Then he aimed his arrow at one of the wizards, noticing that they were 5th circle wizards, so they had to eliminate them first. However, he knew that ordinary arrows didn't work on the barrier wizards cast, so he decided to use some of his psychokinesis to create a pathway for the arrow's trajectory. After gathering some of his psychokinesis on the arrow, he released it and shot another one, breaking the barrier into pieces and hitting one of the wizards in the head. He was glad that they had stopped them from escaping through the teleport gate, while the knights saw their magic circle shattered. The leader of the knights told his men that their exit route was blocked and ordered them to release the seal and kill them all, to which they replied with a yes. Then the knights released the seal while shouting that it was for their emperor. He was shocked seeing them, then suddenly Philip ran forward, making him surprise. Philip tried to block them and he couldn't believe that Philip, the expert high-class knight who was over level 90, wasn't enough to hold back their opponents. He activated his detection skills and saw that the leader of the knights was named McDowell, level 71, with the job of Knight Sword expert middle class, belonging to the Cranian Empire, and serving as the Imperial Hound and the Mira branch manager. Also, McDowell's potential was Class B, strength was 75 plus 5, agility was 71 plus 5, stamina was 73 plus 5, intelligence was 55 minus 10, mentality was 68 minus 5, magic was 68 plus 7, sense was 73 plus 5, and his unique traits were blind loyalty, which was grade B, and fear resistance, which was grade C. He noticed that McDowell's stats had increased and wondered if it was due to the red tattoos effect. On the other hand, Jake, who was fighting with the demon cavalry, asked what was going on and if they were all on drugs. Then Jake asked him in the system chat box if he could just kill them with swords because he thought it would be hard with just that little stick. He replied to Jake that Philip and Pierce were doing fine, but it seemed like it was too hard for him. The plan was made because he trusted their capabilities, but he guessed they didn't have any other choice. Jake shyly attacked the demon cavalry in front of him while asking him if he had said it was hard. He explained that he had just said it because he thought Pierce was having a hard time, making Pierce look at Jake in silence. Then Jake angrily attacked the knights, telling them to look at what had happened because of them and that they all should die. He pulled out his rapier from his inventory, thinking that he should do something too. He attacked one of the knights, and he easily attacked its weak point and cut its arm off. Jake, who saw him, thought it was weird and wondered how he figured out the monster's weak points so easily. McDowell shouted that he didn't expect that they'd be overpowered and asked them who they were, thinking that since they used rapiers, they should be from the Randall Viscounty. But somehow, their swordsmanship looked awkward, so based on his instincts, they weren't from the Randall Viscount. Jake asked McDowell why someone who would die soon needed to know, and he told McDowell that if he was done talking, they should start again, calling them dogs of the Empire. McDowell angrily asked Jake how dare he insult the Imperial Hounds, but then McDowell noticed him in the center, making McDowell wonder if he was the leader. Then McDowell smiled, thinking that he had found a way for them to survive. McDowell ordered his people to give their lives for the Emperor, for the honor of the Emperor, to which the knights transformed into demons. One of the knights launched an attack toward them, and he was stunned, knowing that it was the Black Sacrifice. Jake blocked the knight's attack with his shield, but his shield was squeezed, and Jake exclaimed that it was so strong. He knew that it was a skill that sacrificed oneself by burning life energy and mana to obtain incredible strength for a very short time. He thought they must be planning something, judging by the fact that they were using that skill. The system then showed Jake telling him to be careful. He saw McDowell running toward them and noticed that McDowell was using the Empire KE-type power armor. It was ranked E, with an output of 0.8 CP, an uptime of 2 hours, an operation mode of mana stone consumption, and a defense skill of 3 circles. Philip ran forward to meet McDowell in the center while telling him that they were after him. Philip slashed McDowell, but he noticed that the attack was cancelled out by the force field. Then McDowell ran straight towards him, making Philip call out to him in panic. McDowell launched his fist at him while telling him that it was over. McDowell attacked him with strong power that broke the ground into pieces, but then McDowell shouted, asking what it was and if he was a power armor user while he blocked his attack. McDowell wondered if it was a power armor with shifting parts and thought that judging by its appearance, it should be F-class, but his instinct told him that it would be dangerous if the shifting ended. Then McDowell launched his other fist to attack him while telling him to die, but he just looked at the huge hand of McDowell, wondering what had happened. He knew that he was going to dodge the attack by using the C-rank skill Flash, but a message popped up and he couldn't move. The system showed him that he had encountered a hostile power armor, so Rignator, who was asleep, had woken up. Then a light wrapped around his hand and an armor appeared on his arm. The system showed him that it had a unique trait of an unknown grade, X, and attainments in sword expertise and middle-class psychokinesis. Also, he had fulfilled the minimum qualification which activated Rignator, but he didn't have enough mana for complete activation. So, the system searched for other energy and found intermediate-grade psychokinesis, successfully fixing the shape using his psychokinesis. Rignator had partially activated, leaving him amazed as he looked at his power armor. He knew that it was a barrier that blocked all physical attacks weaker than a mana blade and a defense skill that cancelled out at least 3 circle magic. A mysterious core increased the mana and physical abilities of the user. Even if they had a higher level and experience, they couldn't win against someone with power armor. That's how great the effects of the power armor were. However, power armor was for NPCs, so if they weren't a connected villager, it couldn't be worn. For players, power armor became a dream piece of equipment they could never have, and for NPCs, it was the only way they could fight against the player's outbursts. And he was wearing that power armor. McDowell continuously attacked him, angrily asking what was happening and why his attacks weren't working. He jumped away from McDowell to avoid his attacks and slowly dispelled his power armor while looking at the exhausted McDowell. He used his psychokinesis to grab his rapier nearby, pulled out his sword, and activated his shooting star skill, making McDowell swear in fear. Then he jumped forward and attacked McDowell with his shooting stars, causing McDowell to curse because he even broke his barrier. McDowell wondered if it was the end. McDowell coughed out blood, and the crystal in his chest slowly cracked into pieces, but McDowell thought that even if it was his end, he wouldn't die alone. Then McDowell released his power while shouting honor to the Empire, and McDowell shouted in pain as the crystal slowly crawled inside his body and changed him. He noticed that McDowell's body was fusing with the power armor, and he guessed it was almost over. Then the system showed him that Rignator had detected a forbidden piece of power, making him wonder what it meant. Then the system showed him that it was releasing part of the seal due to an oath, and a bright light came out of his body, surprising him. The bright light surrounded him, and the power armor slowly wrapped around him until it fully consumed him. Then the system showed him that Rignator would show his true self temporarily. A foot with shining armor emerged, and he came out of the bright light in complete armor. Then, he faced McDowell, who had also undergone a complete transformation. McDowell growled at him and leaped forward to attack, but he merely expressed his disgust, which further infuriated McDowell. While McDowell launching his fist towards him, he raised one arm to block McDowell's attack. This action caused both of their people to cease their fighting and look at them. When McDowell's attack connected, it resulted in a massive explosion, throwing McDowell's people aside. Jake and Philip struggled to shield themselves, but he remained firmly in his position, unflinching, glaring at McDowell. Suddenly, McDowell's power armor began to slowly crack into pieces, surprising him. He raised his hand and used psychokinesis to lift McDowell. He then squeezed McDowell, causing McDowell to cry out in pain. He then fully squeezes McDowell, telling him to piss off, and McDowell's power armor gradually disintegrated into pieces, causing him to scream in agony before falling lifeless to the ground, and the Rignator effect slowly fades. He couldn't believe he had done it and knew he had barely met the time limit. Suddenly, he coughed up blood, causing Philip and Jake to panic as they rushed to his side, asking if he was okay. He raised his hand to reassure them that he was fine, all the while contemplating that he had never experienced such a sensation before. It was unlike anything he had felt as a player. It was as if he had glimpsed eternal power. He understood that he had borrowed the item's power this time, but he swore that one day he would attain such strength on his own. A moment later, the magic circle shattered into pieces, revealing a pocket teleportation device and a mana stone. He decided to figure out how to use them later. Then, Pierce informed him that they had located Nikki and the other hostages, but unfortunately, some of them were deceased. He told Pierce that there was nothing more they could do and instructed him to collect their belongings to return to their families. Pierce agreed and reported that Nikki was not in good condition right now, so he urged Pierce to hurry and they should leave. Several minutes later, as they walked towards the cave exit, Jake asked him if they were truly leaving valuable items behind. In response, he asked Jake if he wanted to take them, to which Jake replied affirmatively, emphasizing their usefulness and incalculable value. He acknowledged Jake's point regarding McDowell's power armor and its potential use as evidence against the Empire's spies. He also recognized that dealing with the Imperial Hounds was no easy task, as they posed a significant threat to small nobles. Many users had given up because of them, but he believed it was wiser to focus on their growth and expanding his influence rather than provoking the Imperial Hounds at this time. He reassured Jake that it was all part of the plan, so he should forget about it, and also he was the one who finished it. Jake replied saying that's because he instructed them to stay away. He promised Jake a bonus for his hard work that day, instructing him to go back and rest. Jake excitedly asked if he was truly giving him a bonus and a vacation, and jokingly told him that he couldn't take it back. Jake walked away happily, leaving him to wonder whether Jake was foolish or clever. He then ordered Pierce to provide a report, and Pierce informed him that they had successfully lured their adversaries as planned, with no setbacks to report. He smiled as he looked at Pierce, thinking that he should observe their reactions, although he knew it would be quite evident. Still, he was curious about the expressions they would make after falling for that trick. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forest, someone inquired about how far they had traveled, and Ramon shouted at their guide, asking if they were heading in the right direction. Ramon believed they had tracked Raoul to that forest, but they couldn't find any traces of him. They had also needed time to recover mentally from the shrine and had lost money and swords due to Raoul. Ramon thought they had lost to Raoul because they couldn't use mana skills in the city, despite having 12 knights and their guard leader, Jeremy, equipped with power armor. Ramon looked up, thinking it was their chance now that Raoul was outside the city. The man in the robe pointed in a direction and informed Ramon that it was right there. They proceeded forward and stopped in front of a cave. Kale expressed concern, remarking that it looked kind of dangerous, but he guessed they had to go inside to find out. Ramon insisted that they should go in because they had come outside the city to find Raoul. A moment later, they all laughed joyfully upon seeing a pile of gold on the ground. Ramon happily informed his brothers that they couldn't find Raoul, but this discovery was pretty nice. Jerry added that magic items, artifacts, and even the bodies of wanted individuals were present, with the power armor being the most significant find. Meanwhile, in the city, the knights guarding it observed people on horseback approaching and were surprised to see their young master. One of the knights thanked him for the trouble and reported that they had raided a hideout in the East Forest, and successfully rescued the hostages. He praised their efforts and inquired about the whereabouts of the others. They responded that they had arrived there after completing their mission. These were his trainee knights and first guild members. 6 of them had progressed to experts through training, while the rest were ready to become experts. Additionally, all of them could use mana and had learned Ashton County's sword skills. He instructed them to retrieve supplies from the north and west hideouts, thinking that with over 100 members now, normal rogues wouldn't be able to stand against them. He then ordered everyone that they should go now, to which they agreed. Later, they reached their destination, and the knight guarding the area was astounded, asking if they were from Ashton County and why there were so many of them, observing them holding and carrying hostages. He inquired of the knight on the ground if he was the captain, and the knight confirmed it. The captain explained that they had guided the civilians there as per his request, earning praise from him. The worried civilians asked if Raoul was the one who had rescued the hostages and hoped to finally reunite with their children. At the front, Nakia was relieved to see Nikki in Raoul's arms, and Raoul kindly assured her that Nikki was right there, causing Nakia to express her gratitude repeatedly. He informed Nakia that Nikki was currently in poor condition and that they would need to provide her with treatment at the mansion. He then called Bernard, who informed him that a priest was already at the mansion. He glanced at Nakia, contemplating how he had saved the lives of many who were destined to die and had altered the future of an alchemist consumed by vengeance. He wondered if Nakia's path to becoming a grand alchemist might be different now, and the items and potions she had created might not come to exist in this world. However, he recognized that he still needed Nakia for the county's future and noticed that everything had started to change when he returned to the past. He didn't mind if history was altered. He vowed not to hesitate to shape someone's future as he was no longer a kind-hearted person. Even today, he believed he could have saved many more lives if he had acted more swiftly. Instead, he had focused on completing quests and gaining Nakia's interest. While he knew he had completed the quest overnight and ensured the safety of the city, he couldn't shake his unease. Then, he noticed an elderly woman holding gloves, crying in pain, lamenting that her son had not returned. He recognized that these were lower-class individuals who couldn't afford commissions and that some people hadn't even been given a chance. Upon reflection, he realized that his actions had been solely driven by quests and leveling up. He had never engaged in conversations with people unrelated to his quests. He recalled his initial intention to live in the present when he was reincarnated, but he had continued to treat life like a game. He acknowledged that living a life in accordance with the system wasn't necessarily wrong, but he began to question whether simply following the system-determined quests was truly the right path. He realized that he had been making plans based on the perspective of the player-based lazyung, but wondered if this approach limited his horizons and options. He felt that if he didn't discover something unique that only Raoul, as a nobleman of Connect, could do, something beyond what a player could achieve, he might repeat the failures of his past. He turned to Philip and asked if he could see the disheartened people standing there and provide him with their personal information and circumstances. Philip inquired if he meant all of them, to which Raoul replied in the affirmative. He then instructed Philip to offer consolation money to those who had lost their families or had their families kidnapped, as well as to help them find jobs. Raoul felt sorry for adding more work to Philip's plate when Philip had originally come to fight. Philip commented that it was unexpected, remarking that Raoul usually only got involved when it benefited him. However, he reassured Raoul that the others wouldn't refuse the request, so there was no need to worry. Philip then shifted his gaze toward Jake, implying that there might be someone who would decline. This remark annoyed Jake, who asked Philip why he was looking at him when he didn't mind doing good deeds either. Jake then asked Raoul if he was going to give him some time off. After providing financial support to the grieving individuals, they walked away, expressing their gratitude and wishing Raoul a long life. Raoul patted his horse, considering that the support from Mira's citizens would be valuable when dealing with other guilds. While it had all been calculated, it felt like killing 2 birds with 1 stone since the citizens appreciated it. He also thought it would be a good idea to stay in the area a bit longer to level up and gain practical experience. They conversed with the civilians, unaware of a man behind them who was observing Raoul with a smile. The following day, in the main castle in Mira, Reynaldo expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that Raoul had alleviated many of his concerns. Raoul humbly replied that even without him, he would have resolved the situation. But Reynaldo disagreed, explaining that he couldn't even sleep after hearing the news of Mira being targeted by the Empire's evil forces. Reynaldo believed that without Raoul's report, they would have been in significant trouble. Raoul agreed that he had been surprised by the situation and added that it was unexpected that the Empire's evil forces had infiltrated Mira, which was clearly within the territory of the Kingdom of Reuben. He went on to mention that, judging by their hideout, it appeared they had been working secretly for quite some time, training demonic soldiers. Reynaldo confessed that there had been missing cases in the past, but they couldn't take action due to the treaty. According to the treaty, Mira wasn't allowed to maintain an army and could only operate guards, and even those guards couldn't fully utilize their capabilities outside the city. Reynaldo also tells him that someone from Randall Viscounty came, as he said, and they claim to have destroyed the spy's hideout while vigorously demanding compensation. If it weren't for his request, they would have simply expelled them. He tells Reynaldo that he expected this, but as he has mentioned before, it matters. However, Reynaldo interrupts him by suggesting that they should make it look like Randall Viscounty was responsible and ask if he doesn't think it would be beneficial. Not only would he gain a great reputation, but he might also receive rewards from the royal court. He thanked Reynaldo for his concern but asked him to proceed as he had instructed. Reynaldo tells him that he is being overly cautious and not having fun for his age, but assures him that he will handle the matter well. He knows that taking care of the Empire's hideout will be the Randall bastards' contribution, and it will be their responsibility to attract the Empire's attention as well. Then Reynaldo tells him that he doesn't know what he should give him as a reward, and he doesn't think money will be enough. He asks him what he wants because he is willing to grant him anything, making Reynaldo think that he's finally hearing something he wants to hear. He tells Reynaldo that he'd like to ask him for a favor. Then he mentions that he heard about Reynaldo's mansion having a study with a collection of valuable books. He asks if it would be alright for him to take a look at those books. Reynaldo tells him that it's no trouble and he should feel free to explore. He even offers to let him take one of the books with him. However, it seems like it won't be enough, so he tells him he'll show him the secret treasury and allow him to choose one item as a gift. He thanks Reynaldo for his generosity and notes that, as expected, he is very cool. Reynaldo excitedly mentions that he gives generously when necessary, but some people call him stingy, leaving him wondering why Reynaldo is showing off when he has to give him a reward anyway. A moment later, he arrives at Reynaldo's library, and the butler tells him that he will leave him be, encouraging him to explore at his leisure. He wonders if this is the place and decides to pick one of the books, thinking that they may appear to be miscellaneous books but are actually a marvelous treasury of skill books. He opens one of the books, and the system asks him if he would like to acquire the B-rank skill book, Thunder Pierce. As he looks around, he can't believe that all the books in the library are skill books, and he feels satisfied just by looking at them. He realizes that there's no guarantee he can come here again, so he carefully searches for the book he wants. Then he notices a subtle light coming from a book on the top shelf, so he knows he must take a look at it. The system shows him that it's a study of ancient rituals, spells, and instructional methods for mental cultivation. He grabs it from the center, noting its lengthy title, and when he opens it, the system reveals that it's the Quercus Meditation Art, Grade S. This meditation art is exclusively for psychic ability users, providing a 24-hour automatic meditation effect and enabling mental training. The description explains that it was used by ancient psychics to cultivate spiritual power, and allows purification of the soul through communion with nature and mental imagery space. There is also a popular belief that meditating near an oak tree increases efficiency. He was excited that he had found a meditation method exclusively for S-level psychics, and was happy that he could finally get his hands on it now. He remembered that in his previous life, even with only a B-rank meditation art, he, Bidoan, had managed to reach the top rank in the early stages. However, later on, he was pushed out of the ranked position due to insufficient spiritual power capacity. By the time he tried to find a better meditation art, the path to obtaining skill books had already been blocked by large guilds and other rankers. Originally, skill books related to superpowers had the worst drop rates, and related information was also very limited. But after some time, information about the Quercus meditation art was revealed. According to a flame magician ranker in Japan, Sakata Shijisa, the mayors of the starting cities were hiding one S-rank skill each. Among them, the superpowered skill he had acquired was in Mira's library. He also remembered that he had obtained an S-rank skill book in the starting city, Ignit, in his past life. It was a magician-only skill, so it was useless to him. However, this time was different, and the effects of the meditation method stacked up, so he wouldn't run out of spiritual power this time. Additionally, psychic abilities might not seem significant in the beginning, but as the level increased, the power and range of use greatly expanded. With sufficient spiritual power support, it would be much easier to increase his proficiency. If he could return to the level he had reached in his previous life before a full-scale war with the Empire began, he would be in an excellent position. He excitedly looked forward to that day. Later, in the underground of Reynaldo's castle, he looked at the moderate mana ring he had chosen from Reynaldo's treasury and thought that there were much better items in his hometown. He asked himself if he should undertake some personal reorganization that he had been putting off until now. He knew that he had completed all 70 quests he had gathered in one night and obtained skill books below C rank, as well as rare grade items. Additionally, he had amassed 50,000 player-only coins. He opened his status window and saw that he was currently at level 55 with strength of 66, agility of 67, stamina of 65, intelligence of 58, willpower of 71, mana of 70, spiritual power of 72, and senses of 71. His unique traits were Skill Collector Grade X, Developers Analyzing I Grade X, Psychokinetic Meister Grade S+, Royal Lineage Grade A, and an Unknown Trait Grade X. He noticed that all of his body's stats had surpassed 65 in just 1 month, and even his mana and spiritual power had exceeded 70, indicating that he was now quite skilled. He knew that superhumans, known as sword masters or high-tier psychokinetics, typically had stats around 90. In his previous life, he had even reached 90 in willpower and senses. So, he made a vow that in his current life, he would raise all his stats to 90, and if the opportunity arose, he would strive to become the first player to achieve 100 in stats. It might sound like a dream, but he believed he had many opportunities in his current life. For instance, his Rignator Power Armor was currently in Grade B. Its stats were bound to him, partially open and sealed, with an output of 1.5 core power, an operating time of 5 minutes, and a self-charging operating mode. Its defense techniques included 6 circles, a mid-tier mana blade attribute force field, and a 50% reduction in attribute effects. According to its description, it was a replica of mythical power armor that had traversed time and space. Most of its functions were sealed, and some special functions had transformed. However, the seal would be undone once specific requirements were met. It had 2 special functions, condemnation, which had an effect amplified by 200% against the target of the oath, and covert satiation, which allowed it to absorb lower grade power armor and imitate their functions. One of the 2 items that had followed him when he reincarnated was his skill dex, which had been unlocked through quests. He could also awaken his Rignator power armor this time. Regarding the skill dex, he had received a quest to unlock the next seal. To do so, he needed to complete 50 quests related to the proficiency of random slot skills. However, in relation to the Rignator, he had no clue how to proceed. It was likely because the current output was challenging to handle. Then he realized that he had unlocked a new unique trait, Developers Analyzing I Grade X. Its effect allowed him to borrow the developer's vision and steal information related to the system. It also facilitated the analysis of the flow of special energies. He thought that this must be why he had been able to see NPC information and mana flow all that time. It had been just his assumption, but he believed he must have gained it when he subdued the Imperial Hound's demonic energy. He knew that he would find out more once he saw the quest that appeared along with the trait unlocking. Normally, it should have appeared around the time of leaving the starting city, but it seemed like an error due to attacking the Imperial Hound hideout too early. He also knew that if he followed the same path he did in his previous life, he would have to keep crossing paths with the Empire to obtain the Black Magic Stone fragments. He'd have to navigate the scenario amidst their extreme interference. However, for now, he was a player and a citizen of Connect, so whatever scenario he chose and whichever quest he cleared was up to him. He swore that he would no longer be a puppet following the developer's wishes. If the ending they decided on differed from what he wanted, he would act as he saw fit, even if it meant disrupting the scenario and the quest itself. The next day, he was in the library when someone knocked and asked if he was inside. Then Bernard reported to him that Nikki had regained consciousness, and Nakia would like to meet him. He told Bernard that they should meet Nakia and go see her. A moment later, he asked Nakia about her little sister's condition, and the maid informed her that their young master was there. Nakia kneeled on the ground in tears, thanking him and expressing her gratitude for his kindness. He reassured her not to worry about it and told her that, for now, she needed to be strong for her sister. He looked up at Nikki, wondering if he should check on her condition as well. Nikki thanked him for saving her, then looked to the side, making Nakia apologize because Nikki was very shy. He reassured Nakia that it was fine because Nikki was still young. He looked at Nikki with concern, noticing that she was still unwell, and wondered if he should examine her more closely. He approached Nikki and saw intense waves in her eyes, which surprised him. He couldn't help but wonder what was going on and if the others had not noticed it while Nikki and Nakia were looking at him with confusion. He thought that his eyes might be playing tricks on him, but he would have to examine them again using the developer's analysis. He was shocked to see something unusual in Nikki's eyes, and he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. He thought Nikki was just a kid, but the system showed him that Nikki was level 5 with an unknown class. Her affiliation was Free City Mira, her talent was unknown, and her potential talent was Grade SS. Her strength was 5, agility 3, stamina 3, intelligence 60-30, willpower 65-25, mana 62-61, senses 52-45. Her 3 unique traits were unknown, and he couldn't believe that Nikki's potential talent was SS. Also, he noticed that Nikki's illness was bringing her stats down. but he wondered what if he could cure her illness and bring out her true stats, making him say that he couldn't even imagine how powerful she'd be. Nakia worriedly asked him what was wrong, making him snap back to reality and reply that it was nothing. However, he knew that he'd have to look more into it for Nikki. A few days later, he was in the library and looking at the documents while thinking that he had all the papers he needed, and he was almost done with Mira. Also, everything was going well because they found more rogues and slave traders and rescued 50 more people. So now, Mira was the safest place, and the guildhouse construction was done, with some members living there now. Many civilians they rescued were willing to work for them, and there were many talented workers, so he was confident in every aspect. The only thing left was Nakia. Then Bernard informed him that he was opening the door, and Nakia entered shyly. After they were seated, he asked her how Nikki was doing, and she replied that Nikki was doing much better thanks to the priests, who were working hard, and thanked him again. He told her that it was nice, but he knew that Nakia was just saying it. Nikki's condition had not improved, and it was something they couldn't heal with divine power in the first place. Then he explained to her that he asked to see her because he wanted to talk to her. She replied that she understood and asked him if it was true that he was leaving today because she hadn't been able to properly thank him yet. He replied yes, and told her that he had stayed longer than he was supposed to, so he was on a tight schedule now. She told him to ask her anything and asked him how she may help him, while thinking that there must be a reason why he helped her and Nikki so much. Also, Nakia really wants to be of help, but every noble she has met so far has been very greedy, and they are people who are only nice on the surface. So she is scared Raoul might be the same, and she doesn't want to disappoint Raoul. Then he told her that it was not what she was thinking and she should read that first while giving her the documents. She accepted it in confusion and was shocked to see what was written on them. She accidentally let go of them while looking at the pardon letter, saying that he forgave all sins committed by Nakia in the past and released all charges on Nakia. She shockingly asked him if it was real and how did he do it. He replied that luckily, it was something that could easily be settled with money. He knew that the paper he just gave Nakia pardoned her of her sins, and he had to use quite a lot of money to get permission from the Alliance, but it was nothing compared to Nakia's worth. She was teary while thinking that she had to suffer through 5 years of pain because of the mana restriction, and it was a problem she thought she could never escape. But Raoul solved it so easily, making her think that she was stupid to have compared Raoul with other nobles and she was so arrogant. He asked her if she could tell him how she got her mana restricted, if it was okay with her, and she replied that when she was a kid, she left her hometown. Her alchemy teacher saw her talent as an alchemist and helped her get into the Alchemist Association. She made a name for herself as a young, talented alchemist and even mastered 3-circle magic at the age of 13. But then, misfortune struck all of a sudden, and there was a disease outbreak in her hometown, which took the lives of her family. There was only Nikki left when she got there, and she tried to bring Nikki to the association and live with her, but misfortune didn't stop. When Nikki turned 6, she got an incurable disease, and it was probably because of her. There were many hazardous substances around her, and she focused on finding a cure for 2 years. She made it to the 5th circle at the age of 18 during the process, but it meant nothing to her. When Nikki's death was approaching, she couldn't think of any solutions. So she broke the taboo by using alchemy on a person and kept Nikki alive by using materials she stole from the association. But Nikki couldn't even stay awake without medicine. Then she was caught breaking the taboo and got kicked out of the association with constraints. Then they stayed there after wandering around for a while, and the city was safe, and God's blessing there helped with Nikki's illness. But mana restrictions and a sick sister didn't look good to the people there. He told her that she had been through a lot and gave her the potion while telling her to drink it, explaining that it would free her. She was shocked. She slowly took the potion from him and drank it straight away. Then a powerful power came out of her body. She closed her eyes, thinking that it had been 5 years, but she felt it still relaxing, and she missed it so much. He was smilingly looking at her, showing that Nakia's level was 68 with Intermediate Alchemist 5th Circle class. Her affiliation is Free City Mira, her potential talent grade is S, her strength is 43, her agility is 48, her stamina is 55, her intelligence is 80, her willpower is 77, her mana is 78, and her senses are 81. Also, her unique traits are Master of Alchemy grade S, Precise Tuner grade A, Genius Absurdity grade A-, and an unknown trait. She opened her eyes and understood what Raoul really wanted from her. Then she knelt in front of him while telling him that she, Nakia, would be loyal to him. She was eager to see him save many others, just like how he saved her and Nikki. He reached out to her and patted her head while telling her that he accepted her loyalty, and that he wouldn't forget what she said. Then he gave her another document and told her that he would give it to her as well, making her ask him what it was. He replied that it was for Nikki's illness, a mana filaria, leaving her stunned in shock. He explained to her that a great alchemist who was no longer in that world had left it, and there was a missing part that needed more research. However, she would make the perfect cure using it, and it was the first order he gave her as her lord. She cried in happiness and told him that she would make the perfect cure with her life, thinking that she had decided to live for Raoul for the rest of her life. Afterward, Nakia left, and he stretched his body while thinking that talking and acting like this was still awkward for him. But he knew that he had to practice because it was the place he lived in, and the people he faced were citizens of Connect. He knew that today was a great success because the first member who wasn't handed to him was an alchemist who would leave a mark in history. He also knew that Nakia would make the cure because the great alchemist who was no longer in that world was Nakia herself. He remembered that in the past, Nakia had also fought the incurable disease called monophilaria. After researching for a long time, she finally made a cure, but during the process, she sacrificed many people. He thought it didn't matter now because he was lucky that data about Nakia's cure was still in Cafe Link. He knew that he had given Nakia the defective version on purpose so she could grow, and he hoped she would no longer feel burdened by Nikki when she made the cure. But even if she couldn't make it in time, he could give her the rest of the data. He smiled, thinking that everything he had planned to do in Mira was done, so now he had to prepare for his next destination. His next destination was the capital of the Reuben Kingdom, also known as the Tomb of Sword Metropolis Tyrium, and he was getting excited about what would happen in the vast city, so he should get going. Days later, someone saw people appear at the gate, and Jake excitedly told them to look at all those people. The capital sure was different. He thought they were there in the capital of the Reuben Kingdom, Tyrium. He told his people that there was no need for them to get in line since they were from the county, so they could go in, to which they excitedly replied, yes. Then they walked directly in. He thought he left most of the guild members in Mira and brought the minimum amount, so it should be easier for them. But he was surprised to see nothing in front of him and wondered why there were no carriages or escorts. He asked Bernard if he had sent the message that they were coming, and Bernard replied that he was sure he did. Then Bernard told him that there must be a mistake, and he'd head to the mansion first to bring people. He asked Bernard if he knew where the mansion was and told him that they should just move together. Bernard asked one of the people if she knew where the Ashton County mansion was, but the woman replied that she had no idea. Then Bernard tried asking other people, but a man asked him if Ashton County was the warrior family and if there was an Ashton mansion in Tyrium. He told Bernard to try looking for it in the Noble District. When they arrived at the Noble District gate, the Noble District patrol apologized to him because they had never heard of an Ashton County mansion in the Noble District, so they couldn't enter. He didn't expect his family to be popular, but he wasn't expecting this. Suddenly, Jake shouted at the patrol that soldiers were dying while stopping monsters at Ashton County, and they were asking where Ashton was. He asked them if they didn't even know who was maintaining that peace. He knew that civilians not knowing about their family made sense because it was far, and his father rarely visited the capital. But he wondered if there was no one who even knew of the mansion's existence. He remembered that he had heard there was a huge mansion there for exchanges with nobles and royals. He thought it was inconvenient and asked Bernard if he could head to the office and find the address, to which Bernard told him to leave it to him. A moment later, one of the patrol asked him if he was sure it was the paper because he was sure that the address written on it was for Baron Gendar, making them surprised. He asked the patrol if it was really Baron Gendar and not Count Ashton. To which the patrol replied, yes, and explained to him that Baron Gendar had been living there for over 10 years now, but they could head there for now. He called Bernard, and Bernard reported to him that Baron Gendar was a 50-year-old male, and Baron was his distant cousin. Also, Baron was in charge of foreign affairs. He replied that he understood and told everyone that they should go to the mansion because he'd have to see it himself. A few minutes later, they arrived at the mansion, and the guard asked them who they were again. Philip replied that they were with Ashton County's youngest son, Raoul, and asked the guard where the foreign affairs officer was. However, the guard just asked them who Ashton County was and if they had an invitation. Philip asked the guard what he meant by an invitation, but the guard asked him back if they had come to a party without an invitation and pointed to the side, telling them to wait over there because he would be back. He was pissed to hear that there was a party, and Jake shook in anger upon hearing this. Then Jake jumped off his horse and grabbed one of the guards, asking, "What the heck is happening here? Are they asking the owner to wait outside?" He told them that he didn't care who Baron Gendar was, but they should tell Baron to come out. The other guards shouted that there were intruders and whistled their instruments. However, the guards let go of their spears and ran away in fear, leaving Jake shocked. Jake asked them what had just happened and if they were running away. He then told his people that they should go inside. But as they were about to move forward, someone shouted at them to stop and asked who they were. Philip introduced himself as Philip of the Golden Bear Knights of Ashton County and asked the man where Baron Gendar was. The man asked Philip why intruders were looking for the Baron, but then he realized something and immediately apologized, explaining that he had heard they were coming. but it was late. He said he would let the Baron know right away and ordered the guards to bring them to the reception room, leaving them wondering what was happening. Later, they entered the mansion, and he noticed that it was as big as he had heard. It would take forever to go around, even with a carriage. He was surprised to see a building that only the direct lineage of Ashton County could use. He wondered why he heard music from that building and noticed strangers strolling in the front yard. Jake asked the guard if there was an event today because someone had mentioned a party. The guard replied that today was Baron Gendar's third son, Aaron's birthday party. Parties happened too often there, so they were confused as well. Jake was shocked and angrily asked the guard whose party it was. Then someone told Raoul that he was finally there, and a man walked down the stairs, asking if he was Raoul and commenting that he had grown a lot. He noticed that the man seemed strong, but Baron Gendar was only level 50, not even an expert. He understood why other families looked down on Ashton and why his father had put that Baron in charge of foreign affairs, but he couldn't accept it. Baron Gendar was even looking down at him. He asked Baron if he knew him, and Baron replied that he must have forgotten since it had been a long time. But he was basically his uncle and was like a brother to his father. However, he told Baron that he had never heard his name mentioned as his uncle. Baron laughed, calling him clever, and told him that it must be hard for him to understand since the Ashton family tree was a bit complicated, but he could just call him uncle. He knew that Baron thought he was stupid, but he swore that he wouldn't let Baron take advantage of him. He asked Bernard if he could re-explain what that guy had to do with him. Then Bernard, who was looking straight at Baron, replied that Baron Gendar was Count Ashton's second cousin, and Baron was his third cousin and was in charge of foreign affairs at the capital. Baron, shouting, asked him what he was doing in front of an adult and if his father had not taught him to respect his elders. But he just told Baron that he must be very comfortable with his father and asked him if he wasn't scared of the Ashton County. He asked Philip how many people could talk comfortably with him, except for direct descendants of his family, and Philip replied that only the Count's younger brother, Viscount Austin, could. He asked Philip why that was, and Philip replied that it was to show respect to Count Ashton and clearly establish a hierarchy. He then told them that when a Count's child comes of age, they inherit the title of Viscount and some land, so he also inherited some land with a population of 10,000. He asked Baron if there was a reason why he should be looked down on by a cousin he had never known. Baron replied that it was his fault, and he had forgotten that he was now an adult. He promised to show respect and asked if Raoul was satisfied. Raoul replied with a nonchalant whatever and thought that there was a lot for Baron to explain. He also asked Baron why he didn't explain to them what was going on there, but Baron replied that he wasn't sure what he was talking about. Philip asked Baron why there was no one to escort them when they had sent many messages about their arrival, and Baron replied that he had told them to send a carriage, but there must have been a mistake, and there were many guests today. Then he apologized to Raoul, but Philip asked Baron one more question. He asked why Baron was holding a birthday party for his son at the main building. Baron explained that they needed to have a huge party to show who they were, and it was all part of foreign affairs, so they shouldn't worry about it. He sarcastically asked what the guard knew about nobility, but Philip sighed, deciding to let it go for now because Raoul was there as well. Pierce handed a paper to Raoul, telling him that it was the invitation he found in the yard. Raoul showed it to Baron, pointing out that the party seemed to have no correlation with Ashton County, and all he could see on the invitation were the names and the symbol of the Gendar family. Baron fearfully replied that it was just an invitation and it was definitely a formal Ashton County's. Then Baron seriously reminded him that, as he had said, it was just an invitation, and he would like to stop arguing about the party because it was past his authority, even if Raoul was the young master. He suggested that Raoul could go argue about it at home. Raoul asked Baron if he really thought the party was appropriate, and Baron confidently replied, of course, explaining that it was a long tradition to use the party hall when the mansion was empty. He reached for something in his coat, knowing that Baron was not entirely wrong because it was common to lend a mansion to other nobles, but only if Baron had permission from Count Ashton himself. Then he showed the documents and told Baron that as a temporary Count Deputy, he ordered him to end that party within an hour and report the details of the funds spent on the party. Baron angrily shouted that it was nonsense and that Raoul was being ridiculous. He couldn't just send the guests back and asked who gave Raoul that authority. Raoul made it clear that he was not following the order and asked Baron why he wasn't worrying about his family, as he didn't think there were any guests he should worry about. He told Baron that he was giving him an hour out of generosity and asked if he should go to the party hall himself and inform the guests. Baron replied that he would wrap up the party but warned that Raoul would regret it. Raoul put the documents back in his coat, knowing that the worst that could happen was his father yelling at him a little. He was curious about what gave Baron the confidence to do all of this. Also, there wasn't any concrete evidence about the collapse of Ashton County, making him wonder if maybe he could find something about it there, because who knows, maybe he'll hit the jackpot. A moment later, he felt frustrated, knowing that the place they had escorted him to wasn't the main building but the mansion's annex. The man explained to him that the Baron had said, since the main building was crowded, he wanted them to prepare a quiet place for him. However, he knew that it was nonsense and turned his horse to begin riding while shouting that he didn't wish to hear it and that he was going to the main building. His people agreed and followed him. Later, in the main building, he furiously opened the door and asked if they were in their right minds. He clenched his fist in anger when he saw the Baron and the Baron's family inside, realizing that in the 3-story main building and office, only the Count and his family were supposed to stay. The entire Baron's family living there angered him. He asked Baron how he planned to explain this and if it was a Count family tradition for ministers and the like to dare occupy the Count's office. Baron fearfully replied that they were just borrowing it for a while, and he didn't even come there once a year anyway, so it was a waste to keep it empty. He pulled out his rapier while angrily shouting at Baron to get lost at once. He threatened that if they didn't empty the mansion by today, he would deal with them all, even if they were close family. Furthermore, he decided to strip the Baron of his position as the Foreign Affairs Minister, which shocked Baron. He angrily told Baron that if he wanted to raise an objection, he should come to him by tomorrow with documentation showing that he had properly performed his duties as a minister. Baron fumed in anger but silently walked away with his family. He watched them through the window, thinking that they were wrapping up with the preparations. He realized that he needed to find the materials he needed and worried they might have been discarded due to the mansion's condition. Fortunately, they were still there. Then he looked around, noticing that all documents related to the management and finances of the mansion were left in the office. He thought they must have been very complacent to think that nothing much would happen overnight. However, in his previous life, he had studied business administration and worked at a trading company. Bernard could be considered the best expert on mansion-related matters. Philip informed him that the Baron had left the mansion with his family. He asked Philip for confirmation because he couldn't believe it and if they had left quietly. Philip replied that it was a bit unexpected, but they had quietly left with only the necessary clothes. He told Philip to forget about it and asked if it wasn't obvious what they were thinking. He mentioned that they would return anyway, so there was no need to take all their baggage out. Philip asked if it would really be alright and if it wouldn't be better to give them time to slowly organize. He replied that it was better to quickly weed out the rotten parts and that it would be more efficient to confront Baron when he was looking down on them. He also knew that he must use that place as a branch of the first guild unit once he found a suitable location in the capital, and since it was his house, he couldn't have random individuals causing trouble inside it. Pierce told him that it seemed like the Baron had other backing, and he wondered if something strange would happen. He told them not to worry because it didn't matter what trick the Baron had up his sleeves, and they should have a bit more faith in their county. Then Jake grabbed Philip and Pierce, asking them why they were so worried and telling them to stop with the gloomy talk. He suggested they take a look around the mansion and follow their young master's instructions. He laughed and replied that Jake was right and that they might need to use some force tomorrow, so they should all rest. Except for Bernard, they were all dismissed. Then Jake told Philip and Pierce to go while winking at Raoul in the back. When they were alone, he told Bernard that he knew what they had to look for. Bernard replied that it was his expertise. He then told Bernard that they didn't have much time, so they should start right away. The next day, 2 daggers clashed with each other. Then he raised 2 more daggers with his psychokinesis while shouting for 1 more. He threw it directly at the daggers in the air, but before his daggers collided with them, the 2 daggers shook and fell in front of Bernard, who was controlling them. He told Bernard that he had gotten a lot better and that he never thought he'd already be able to handle 2 daggers like that. Bernard told him that he still had a long way to go. He knew that it had been a month and a half since Bernard awakened his superpowers with the skill book. He couldn't believe that Bernard was already that skilled, making him realize that Bernard was no ordinary talent. It was not easy for a wind mage to handle a weapon so precisely, and at that rate, Bernard would reach an intermediate level in about 6 months, becoming a multi-talented psychic that was hard to find anywhere. Then he asked Bernard if they should do some martial arts training next and reminded Bernard that he had told him back then too that it was difficult to demonstrate power with just one superpower. It was easy and efficient to increase proficiency by combining various skills in the beginning. He asked Bernard if he was ready, and Bernard replied that he was. However, Bernard felt something and told him that it seemed like they had a guest. He couldn't catch up with the long-distance sensing ability of Bernard. He told Bernard that they should go and, as a host, he had to greet guests properly. Bernard replied that he understood and asked him if he would bring the things they had prepared yesterday, to which he agreed. He told Bernard to bring them all because he deserved to be rewarded for his hard work last night. Bernard wore his jacket, knowing that something always happened every time their young master made that face, and he hoped Baron wouldn't do anything foolish. On the floor of the building, Jake was surprised to see a lot of people and asked Raoul if he had buried a treasure trove or something because he didn't understand why there were so many people gathered there. Then Jake noticed that among the escort knights, some were exuding formidable vigor, and there were even soldiers outside the mansion too. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like something their party could handle alone. He wondered if their young master Raoul had something else in mind. On the other hand, Baron was smiling arrogantly, thinking that things were going well for him and that the young master had taken the bait just like he had expected. Baron also believed that all the work must be completed now that Melvin was away, and that way, he could secure a position for himself. Then he noticed the blood relatives of the Ashton County residing in the capital, guessing that they must have gathered because of what happened last night. He thought that losing his position as the Foreign Affairs Minister and being kicked out of the mansion weren't just his problems because the blood relatives in the capital also used to hold banquets in the mansion hall at the county's expense. Even the management fees for the mansion had been flowing to them through his pocket, so there was no way those who had their benefits taken away overnight would remain silent. Baron admitted to himself that it was a mistake on his part to hold the party in his name and use the office, but they didn't know about it. Raoul must only know how to act like a noble, but he considered Raoul an idiot who didn't understand the situation. Then he told Melvin in his head that he didn't know why he entrusted the seal to his young son, but he would use it well. Raoul walked forward with his knights, causing the people around them to wonder if that pretty face was really a blood relative of theirs, if he was the young man who had been causing trouble for Baron Gendar, and if it was really true that Raoul had won the swordsmanship competition. He looked at everyone and told them that he had unexpectedly ended up standing in front of so many people. Then he asked if everyone was there because of the issues with Baron Gendar. Baron shouted in reply that it was right and that his blood relatives were angry at his unreasonable behavior and had gathered there. Baron suggested that Raoul could apologize to the adults and fix the mess now, but he calmly told everyone that he could assume Baron represented everyone there. As he had promised, he would try to sort out the rights and wrongs. However, Baron interrupted him, finding humor in the idea of discussing rights and wrongs. He told Raoul that the mansion had been managed alternately by blood relatives living in the capital for decades, and that it was not a playground for a young brat from the main family who didn't even know anything. Then the people began to shout that Baron was right and asked if the main family was looking down on them. They also shouted that Count Melvin was too much to think that he had given the authority to represent him to a child. On top of it, Melvin had even provided fewer subsidies when opening additional mansions, and improving methods weren't enough. He knew that at that point, he wouldn't have time to tell them what Baron Gendar had done and why Baron was fired. He thought it was not important right now, and as he expected, things might get more complicated while activating his eyesight skills. He saw that a total of 5 forces had gathered there. First were Ashton County's blood relatives, who had participated without much thought. Second were the spies of the Imperial Hounds, the intelligence bureau of the Cranian Empire. He thought it was not even shocking because it was obvious that the Empire was behind the conflicts across the continent. But the third category was unexpected because they were knights of the Delamian family, one of the 5 great families of the Brennan Republic. The man in the front was named Graham, 45 years old, on level 88, with a job of Knight Advanced Sword Expert. He belonged to the Reuben Kingdom, Baron Han of the Brennan Republic, and the Delamian family. Graham's nickname was the Red Executor, his potential ability was A. His strength was 82, his agility was 72, his stamina was 84, his intelligence was 62, his willpower was 68, his mana was 71, and his senses were 76. Also, his unique traits were Tireless Body Grade A and Melee Specialist Grade B. He saw several mid-tier expert knights other than Graham, but he had no idea why families much stronger than Ashton were flocking there, making him think that it was a pain in the ass. And there were those bastards too, the Knights of Randall Viscounty. The man's name was Raphael, 26 years old, level 61, with a job of Knight Beginner Sword Expert, and he belonged to Randall County. Raphael's nickname was the 4th Young Master of Randall County. His potential ability was B. His strength was 61, his agility was 65, his stamina was 58, his intelligence was 61. His willpower was 53, his mana was 60, and his senses were 55. Also, his unique traits were Royal Lineage Grade B and Agile Grade C. He didn't know about Raphael's skills, but he wondered why the 4th Young Master of Randall County, whose sign itself was a weapon, was there. He guessed that Raphael might be there because of what happened at Mira, but still, Raphael wouldn't be able to move blatantly. Lastly, the 5th one was the traitors of the family who were the culprits behind all the commotion and who would come to the front and take the lead when things went wrong. The man's name was Titus, 27 years old, level 65, with a job of knight intermediate sword expert. He belonged to the Reuben Kingdom, Jaddan Viscountcy, Brennan Republic, and the Jaddan family. Titus's potential ability was his strength was 70, his agility was 64, his stamina was 68, his intelligence was 62, his willpower was 65, his mana was 63, and his senses were 58. Also, his unique traits were Royal Lineage Grade A, Straight-Headed Instinct Grade A, and Twisted Fighting Spirit Grade B. He also knew that Titus was his elder cousin and the eldest son of Viscount Jaddan, who was his uncle. He knew that his father, Count Melvin D. Ashton, had two brothers, his older brother Jaddan and his younger brother Austin. Of the three, Melvin was the most talented, but because of primogeniture, Jaddan was expected to be the next count. Jaddan was arrogant and violent, so if anything bothered him, he would hurt or kill them. One day, Melvin achieved intermediate expert status and gained more support than Jaddan to be the next count. Jaddan felt threatened and jealous, and he tried to assassinate Melvin. However, the attempt was stopped, and Jaddan lost his privileges. Time passed, and Melvin became the count. Jaddan still received the title of Viscount and a large amount of land, but he couldn't accept the fact that he had lost the title of count to his younger brother. Jaddan ended up selling his assets to a rival family, Marquis McNeil, and left the kingdom with his followers. All of this happened 15 years ago when Raoul Ashton was born, so seeing Viscount Jaddan's son there, Raoul could tell where Baron Gendar stood. He knew that the people there didn't lose anything from the incident 15 years ago, so they didn't have any negative feelings toward Viscount Jaddan. They probably thought they had a chance to push them off and take the spot. He remembered that in his past life, the Ashton County split up into multiple factions and fell apart. He guessed that maybe they made the right choice, but that only applied if he wasn't there, and he swore that he'd teach them they had made a big mistake. He signaled to Philip, to which Philip nodded in agreement while he thought that he knew what was going on there, so it was time to make his move. Then Philip struck the stainless drum, creating a loud sound that made everyone silent in shock. He told them that he had heard enough from them and that he would like to say something now. Then he called Bernard and Pierce to hand out books to them, and Bernard and Pierce began to distribute books to everyone in the room. The people looked at the books confused and saw that the book title was a report on the management and financial operations of Count Ashton's estate with attached evidence and investigation materials regarding Baron Gendar's embezzlement and misappropriation. The people began to open the books, and all of them were shocked, including Baron, who was shaking in anger. Then Baron slammed the book hard on the ground while shouting that it was not real and it was a fake. However, the people thought the book seemed legitimate, though it was hard to believe. Baron angrily told him that he had come there yesterday, yet he claimed to have done all of this while he was there. But he just smiled and asked everyone if they should have some real talk. Then he told Baron that it said that 200 trainees were getting free lessons there and asked Baron where they are now. Baron replied that they gave up and ran away with the equipment. He asked Baron if all 200 had run away and if he was saying that they were all from somewhere else. He found it strange how Baron had chosen every trainee from outside the capital when the point of the free lessons was to gain popularity in the capital. Baron shouted in reply that they all ran away and who he picked was up to him. He calmly agreed and told Baron that there were addresses in the book, so they would find out more about it once they started investigating. They should move on to the next point. Then he told Baron that it said he gave 100 gold swords as presents to other barons. However, according to the investigated report, they had all received 10 gold replicas. It also mentioned that he hired 100 C-rank mercenaries as mansion guards, but he wondered where they were because there was no way 20 rank F mercenaries were all he had. Additionally, there were frequent parties at the main building, such as a celebration for the Baron's son, the Baron's wife's birthday party, the Baron's hunting ceremony, and more. He didn't understand what all those had to do with estate expenses. He closed the book, amazed that he had listed them all, and he had to stay up pretty late to find all of those discrepancies. He remembered that last night, he found out that some of the papers were fake, so he had to sneak into the Baron's house. They found the real book of accounts using his analysis and Pierce's observation skills. Then Bernard organized them all and put them in a book. He used his document copying skill to make multiple copies, so everyone there should now know how much the Baron had embezzled until now. Then he asked everyone if they could see that it seemed like more than half of the estate expenses had been embezzled and if anyone disagreed with firing Baron Gendar. However, no one spoke a word. Then Baron clapped and shouted that it was amazing. Then Baron angrily told him that he really amazed him and asked how long he had prepared for it, if it was 1 year or 2 years. He told him that he was a really cunning person. He sighed, wondering what Baron was trying to achieve now, and Baron grabbed the book while asking everyone if they sensed something fishy about it. Then Baron shouted that he had never seen such a thoroughly organized temporary report in his life. He explained that a formal investigation might get maybe 2 or 3 pages of the report, but Raoul had made a book with 30 pages. Baron shouted to everyone that his nephew was claiming he had made that in a day, but it made no sense, and it was clearly something Raoul had prepared beforehand to try to fire him and restrain the family in the capital. Then the people began to shout that Baron was right and it had to be political intrigue. Ashton was trying to save his budget, and they were going to decline support for other families if Baron Gendar got fired. Baron shouted at him that they were not going to let it happen and called Jackson. Jackson immediately walked forward with a paper and told him that it was a paper with a list of their requests. If he signed it and left, they would excuse him for today's disrespect. He ordered Jake to check it, and Jake grabbed the paper from Jackson. Then Jake began to read. First, the ownership of the estate had to be transferred to a joint title under the names of Baron Gendar and the other family members. Second, the management of the estate, including stewardship, would be determined by the family members in the capital. Third, they wanted to allow the sword skill exclusively shared within the main family to be shared without restrictions among the members of the branch family. Jake cursed in shock and shouted at everyone that they had all lost their minds. They were all having parties with the money they made from killing monsters, and he told everyone to go fuck themselves. Baron told Jake that he had no right to speak to him and asked if it was really what the main family wanted. Jake squeezed the paper and told Baron that, as he said, he could go away. He also said they were not giving up that house, and that was the most ridiculous idea he had ever heard. Baron grabbed something from his coat and pointed his dagger at Jake while asking how he dared to insult them. Then Pierce and Philip pulled out their weapons, and the other knights on Baron's side drew their swords too. The two sides pointed their weapons at each other. He ordered Jake to stop, and Jake immediately threw the paper. Baron couldn't believe that Jake didn't care that he had pulled out a knife, but he knew that Jake had only pulled it out to threaten him. Those three right there were the best knights in Golden Bear, so he stood no chance. Baron told him that Jake had insulted them, and if he didn't execute Jake and apologize, he would consider him the same. He also said he should apologize if he wanted to avoid bloodshed. But he just smiled and told Baron that he meant Jake didn't say anything wrong. Then he stepped on the paper and asked Baron why he didn't stop pretending. He told them that he didn't expect it to be solved with those papers, but he thought Baron would be embarrassed at least. Then he pulled his sword out, raised it, and stabbed it on the stage, telling Baron that he guessed he was a greater person than he thought he was. He asked Baron if he knew that he would never sign that paper over his objections, so he should say what he really wanted. Baron remembered that he had heard the youngest was the weakest and talentless, making him surprised at how strong Raoul was. But he swore that he was not backing out now. Then Baron shouted at him that there was no use trying to bluff, and he couldn't leave that place unless he signed the paper. Then the knight closed the door shut, and Baron confidently told him again that he couldn't leave that place unless he signed the paper, so he should think carefully. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 4 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.